You're watching 535.
This is 535.
535.
You're watching 535.
535.
535.
535.
We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
It's Tuesday, May 12th, and for the first time, this is 535. I'm Susan Davis, contributing host and analyst, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Daniela Diaz, a congressional reporter for Notice, and Mariana Sotomayor, a Capitol Hill correspondent for Puck News. It is a pleasure to be here with you both.
So good to see you. I'm so excited to kick this off with you.
So 535, here's the plan. We want to be here 3 days a week, 3 hours a day, when Congress is in session. And I think we've put together a really good team to do this. Mariana, can you talk more about the other reporters that are going to be part of 535?
Yeah, it's a stellar group that's contributing, doing these interviews alongside of us. Here are just a couple of those names. My colleague at Puck, Leanne Caldwell, Paul Kane and Igor Bobik, who are currently at Notice working alongside Daniela, but it's soon to be the Star. We have Brody Mullins, formerly of the Wall Street Journal, as well as Scott McFarlane, he's Chief Washington Correspondent at Midas Touch, and Luke Mullins, who's a contributing writer for Washingtonian.
Danielle, what should we tell people to expect from this show? Why should they be watching?
I think it's going to be a little bit of everything Congress related, Sue. I mean, we're going to talk to former members, we're going to talk to current members. That's who we've got on the show just this week. We're going to talk to current and former staff members because, as we know, this place is not only powered by the lawmakers, the 535 members in this building, but also the people that support them, dozens of staff in each office who do all the nitty-gritty work and are the experts on the issues that we plan to talk to them about. We're also going to talk to our fellow journalists because they are also alongside us, running around these hallways, talking to the newsmakers, and really understand these topics just as well as we do. And of course, we're going to talk to the people who trek to the Hill to make their voices heard, lobbyists, other folks who have a lot to say about the issues that are being talked about here in this building. I'm really, really excited because we're going to be covering issues that maybe the day-to-day news might not be paying attention to. So we're glad we're here and we're really excited to get started.
One of the things we've kept saying when we've been talking about 535 is we're going to focus on this side of Pennsylvania Avenue. I don't think anybody would dispute that the White House is very well covered.
Oh, yes, definitely.
If anything, I think there is some frustration on this end of Pennsylvania Avenue that so much of the conversation is in reaction to the White House so often. So I think that how many times in your reporting careers have you had a press flack or a senator or a lawmaker say to you, what the press should be covering or talking about is really this.
All the time.
Right? And this show is going to create an opportunity to talk about that and also to talk about the agenda. So let's talk a little bit about the agenda. The House and Senate are both back in session this week. Want to kick it off with talking about the Senate?
Love the Senate.
Love the Senate.
100 senators to be tracking at all times. As we're talking right now, y'all, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth is actually talking to senior appropriators in the Senate about the Iran war, about why he, deserves defense funding. I mean, it's going to be a wide array of questions. I actually tuned in a little bit before we sat down here, and he was really being grilled by Democratic senators about his platform, his agenda, the Trump administration agenda. That's just one thing that we're seeing. Of course, the Senate has already moved forward. They were in session yesterday on trying to confirm Kevin Warsh to replace Jerome Powell as the head of the Fed. So that's always been a huge story here, and we've been tracking that. And that's something that maybe got a lot of attention when it was the probe against Jerome Powell that was dropped last month, but now is moving forward to replace him, which his term ends May 15th. Yeah. We're tracking that.
Does that seem like to you that nomination is now largely on a glide path because it's gotten over that hurdle?
Definitely. Tillis was actually the main hurdle in this. Senator Tom Tillis, who's retiring at the end of this Congress and has really become a thorn on President Trump's side.
Retirement has a funny way of doing that to people.
But now that the probe is done, he's moving forward. He's going to probably help confirm Warsh in the final vote. And then also Kash Patel is here. FBI director. He's going to be grilled as well by senators in another hearing. So a lot going on the Senate side today that we're tracking.
I'm really curious to hear from House lawmakers of what they heard when they were home last week. But what is on the House agenda this week?
That's the number one question I think a lot of us have, because we're seeing so many reports coming back about the economy.
Yeah.
Even just today, inflation, 3-year high, it just continues to get higher and higher. Republicans, before they left, were saying, hey, we just passed tax day. Did you all, feel all those savings from the one big beautiful bill? That's really the only argument they have.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's really going to play for people back home, because so many voters, we're seeing it in polling, saying, I no longer trust Trump on the economy. You're even seeing polling showing that Democrats, who haven't had an advantage on the economy, started to have an advantage on the economy. So Republicans are going to have to get a new affordability message. They are working on that. I've been talking to a couple of Republican staffers who are really hoping that the House floor can clear up to pass bills that address cost of living, housing, et cetera, all those different buckets. Is that going to happen?
Yeah.
It's not going to happen this week. That's not going to be on the floor. That could be a potential war powers resolution. Republicans still cleaning up their mess from before this recess, trying to decouple some ethanol legislation that Midwesterners really want to see out of the Farm Bill. Yeah, the Senate doesn't want to touch that.
Biggest issue.
Yeah, they kind of want to send it ready to go for the Senate. And there's also the first appropriation bill. We always talk about appropriation bills, but the first one of the 2027 cycle will be on the floor. It's not controversial, military veterans.
So we didn't even mention reconciliation.
Oh,
yeah,
which is huge.
Yep.
It's one of the only things they usually can
to try to fund the Department of Homeland Security, those ICE and CBP, but there could be an attachment of a $1 billion on Trump's ballroom. That's been a major issue here on Capitol Hill on both sides.
Do you have a sense of, I've been hearing a lot about the ballroom, particularly from people inside DC, campaign people who are like, oh, I don't want to deal with this. But do you have any sense of how much the ballroom has sort of penetrated to the larger country, and that how scared are lawmakers of actually having to take a direct up or down vote on this issue?
Oh, they don't want it to happen. I mean, the amount
Even
of,
Republicans.
Yeah, House Republican leadership staffers that I've talked to that are like, please send it, strip it out, the parliamentarian. Like they hate the parliamentarian for many reasons, but this time they're like, please, Elizabeth, please strip it out, because it will not pass over here on the House side. And the reason why, and probably on the Senate side too, is because, again, everything is clouded under the midterm election. And Republicans do not want to take a vote on a promise that Trump made, right, to voters saying, hey, the ballroom's just going to be privately funded, no taxpayer money. $1 billion, and Republicans will talk about this too, the $1 billion tranche is also to protect the White House and other forms. But, I mean, already Democrats are having a field day with messaging saying your taxpayer money, and most of it are going to go towards the White House. Just for some perspective, Secret Service funding per year is $4 billion. So $1 billion is just going towards the White House. That's a huge amount of money.
And it's really hard for Republicans to square going back home when they're hearing from their constituents about how expensive everything is, that their taxpayer money is going to fund a ballroom at the White House. I mean, this is going to be really difficult for them to square.
There is something psychological about that $1 billion figure, right? Because I think even if you think about the Capitol Visitor Center complex here, that costs about half that to build. So it's kind of hard to fathom how much money is going to be spent. So we've got a lot of great guests this week. Daniela, I think we might have buried the lead a little bit in that we have managed in our launch week to get 2 United States senators to cross the Capitol complex.
Amazing.
We'll talk to Angus King of Maine and Martin Heinrich of New Mexico. Can you run through who else we're going to hear from this week?
I'm planning to talk to the Congressional Progressive Caucus Chair, Greg Casar, later this week, as well as the ranking member on rules, Jim McGovern, about his, passion project of insecurity and hunger. That's something I'm going to look forward to later this week.
And Mariana, I think you have an interview or two up too.
Yes, just today I'm going to be talking to Congresswoman Linda Sánchez. She's a Democrat from California, about child care, affordability, and also some immigration. And also be talking to Tom Cole, the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. Obviously, it's appropriation season, so it's going to be a good conversation.
I hope he smokes a cigar.
No, that would in front of me. No, my lungs are too weak.
You might want to do that interview outside.
Yes, exactly.
So we can get outside on the balcony for that one. Well, I'm so grateful to be here with both of you. I'm excited for what this show is and what it can be. And we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, our colleague Igor Bobek is going to be speaking to Senator Martin Heinrich about an issue that is very important to the American West, about public lands. We're going to be right back.
A simple blood test can detect Alzheimer's years before symptoms appear. Congress can connect Americans to early, accurate dementia diagnosis by supporting the bipartisan Alzheimer's Screening and Prevention Act, allowing Medicare to cover blood-based Alzheimer's screening. Congress has acted to cover mammograms and other life-saving screenings. Now it can redefine Alzheimer's care, unlocking early detection and access to FDA-approved treatments when they work best. Congress, it's up to you. Paid for by the Alzheimer's Association.
National Association of Realtors Advocacy, working to expand access to housing and defend property rights so that more Americans can build generational wealth and prosperity through home ownership, a critical voice in nearly 1/5 of the U.S. economy, supporting 2 jobs for every single-family home sold, and generating more than $760 billion of property tax revenue for state and local governments each year. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
America leads the world in medicine development.
It matters.
We get new medicines first, nearly 3 years faster.
5 million Americans go to work because we make medicines here at home.
And not relying on other countries keeps us safe.
But China is racing to overtake us.
Will we let them?
Or will we choose to stay ahead?
When America leads,
America cures.
Let's tell Washington to keep us in the lead.
Hi, welcome back to the inaugural episode of 535. My name is Igor Bobic. I'm a congressional reporter for Notice. You can read all of our reporting on notice.com, and of course we're going to be rebranding as The Star in a couple weeks on June 3rd. We're very excited about that. We're going to have a bunch of all-stars. We're breaking all sorts of news there, so tune in. But for now, I'm joined by Senator Martin Heinrich of New Mexico. Senator, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you.
And you're our inaugural guest. I'm honored that you would come here on the House side. Can't believe we're both here on the House side chit-chatting. But
my old office is just down the hall.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, not too far ago. Senator, I wanted to talk a little bit about the biggest issues facing this country today. You're the ranking member on the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. I wanted to start with a question you're probably getting a lot in your state.
Yeah.
What is Congress doing about these rising energy costs?
Well, we have a lot that we can be doing about rising energy costs, and unfortunately we're at a time when the administration is making policy decisions that's moving the needle in the wrong direction. So whether that's the war in Iran, which has really driven gasoline and diesel prices incredibly high, whether that was the tariffs that they put on all sorts of feedstocks to be able to generate electricity, whether it's even the fact that they are slow walking and have even issued stop work orders on cheap, clean generation because they disagree with the kind of color of electrons that you're putting on the grid. Everything they've been doing is moving things in the wrong direction. So resolving the war in Iran, getting rid of tariffs for good, putting more projects onto the grid, especially clean energy projects that right now are the cheapest electrons available. All of those things are what Congress should be doing.
The president yesterday called for a suspension of the federal gas tax. The tax is a little over 18 cents a gallon. Do you think that's a good idea?
I think it would provide some immediate relief to folks, but it's not a long-term solution. And we still have to build roads. So, resolving the situation in the Middle East that he created, that is a much bigger impact than waiving the gas tax for a few months. So I think we should focus on the fundamentals. I'm more than happy to give people immediate relief, but I think the long-term solution has got to be to resolve some of the things in the market that are just driving this huge imbalance between supply and demand.
You mentioned the market, obviously a lot of disruption abroad. Is now the time to talk about renewables, and what kind of conversations are you having in Congress right now on the other side of the aisle about that?
Well, I think the most productive conversations are around permitting reform. And, I think to the extent that we can get rid of administrative discretion for both parties in terms of permitting, gives people the kind of certainty that they need to invest in the market. Renewables are cheaper right now, they're faster to develop, if we had a level playing field in terms of permitting, they outperform the rest of the market.
Why does the president so averse to renewables like wind?
Apparently, he saw some wind turbines offshore at one of his golf
in Scotland
resorts, and that had some sort of personal impact on him. I believe that we should be developing our economy. We're going to go through an energy transition. That should be a planned energy transition. We should embrace cheaper sources of electricity and energy broadly. And so I think to the extent that we can work on bipartisan durable solutions, I think that's the best path forward for the country.
You mentioned permitting reform. Obviously, a lot of bipartisan interest in speeding up how we build and the time it takes to build both renewable projects, oil projects, housing, so many issues there. You announced back in March, I believe, that you were restarting discussions about permitting reform with Republicans. How is that going? What is the state of play right now?
I think the conversations have been very productive, and we had a good starting place because we did an effort in the last Congress that didn't make it across the finish line, but which I think had a really balanced and effective approach to things. So we didn't start from zero. I think the biggest threat to permitting reform right now is the bad faith that this administration is showing. So we've had a court ruling saying what the Secretary of Interior was doing and not permitting fully vetted projects is illegal, but those projects aren't moving off his desk. And then when you look at the Department of Defense, there are something like 150 generation projects that have been just frozen at DOD that would put cheap electrons onto the grid as well. So when you show that sort of bad faith, it makes it harder for me especially to get individual senators in my caucus to embrace permitting reform if they think it's only going to be applied to one side of the ledger.
I've talked to some of your fellow Democrats who are concerned that, if they do go for this possible deal, there's going to be a thumb on the scale, right, from the administration. They're going to permit or accelerate their projects, oil and gas, while keeping renewable projects frozen.
Right.
How do you get around that?
I think to the extent that we can structure permitting reform in a way that avoids administrative discretion and gives projects of whatever flavor a clear path to what boxes they need to check to get fully permitted.
I see. And are you expecting action on this before the midterms? Is that going to make things difficult or easier to get this through?
I think the sooner we can act, the better. Obviously, when you get close to the midterms, it becomes very difficult. So we either need to come up with something that both sides can embrace by the summer or in the lame duck.
And who are you talking to? Is it Senator Capito? Is it somebody else in the admin?
Senator Capito, Senator Lee, other members of their caucus.
And you mentioned Senator Lee. He wants to see big changes to the NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act, and he wants to reduce the time that people have to challenge some of these projects. What do you think about those concerns, and is that something you would support?
The timeline is a very real issue, and I'll give you an example. When I was in this building, when I was a new member of Congress, I started working on a transmission line that got energized a few months ago.
Right.
3.5 gigawatts of clean energy, 550-mile transmission line. It shouldn't take 18 years for something like that to get built. So we should either be able to get to yes or no faster. So I'm sympathetic to that issue. NEPA is not in my committee's jurisdiction. It lives in the EPW committee.
Right.
So I'm going to leave that to Senator Capito and Senator Sheldon Whitehouse to figure out what makes sense there. But certainly in my committee, transmission is front and center.
You are a big wonk on energy transmission. Transmission capacity, obviously, a lot lacking there in this country. You can build as many projects as you want. If you can't deliver that energy, across the country, it's just going to go to waste. What is Congress doing about this? What can it do to accelerate some of these projects?
We can do interregional planning so that we can trade electrons across multiple markets. That has the impact of being able to bring down cost pressures, reduce wholesale prices, which then feed into the actual prices that consumers pay, bring down the commercial rates that manufacturers pay. So transmission is a critical element, one of a number, but a critical element of reducing cost pressures.
Yeah. Any progress on that front with your?
Yeah. No, we're having constructive conversations around transmission.
How does the rise of AI and all these big data centers that they hog all this energy, how does that affect these talks over permitting reform and energy?
I think one of the things it's done is it's made Republicans realize that you can't facilitate a bunch of new load if you don't have transmission. It's also made everyone sympathetic to customers who are saying, hey, if you're going to do that, first, do not raise my rates, and better yet, lower my rates. So, my hope is that some of these developers get savvy enough to realize that you can't develop a big new data center if you're going to economically harm already stressed working class folks.
Yeah. And in general, are you pro AI? You want to see AI develop in this country?
I want to see AI develop, but it needs to be done responsibly. We can build these centers with clean energy, with good union jobs, with responsible water use, and that's a big one where I come from. We have data centers that use a huge amount of water, and then we have advanced technologies for cooling that really reduce that dramatically. I think we need to be checking those boxes if projects are going to have local community support.
Yeah. Summer is coming up, obviously. How concerned are you about the energy grid right now ahead of summer? Obviously, a lot of trouble spots.
There are a lot of trouble spots. I think it would help dramatically if we could get some of these projects that have gone all the way through their regulatory process and are ready for a signature from a secretary. If we could get those connected to the grid, the faster we can connect those, the fewer problems we'll have.
I want to turn to another big topic here in Congress, which is conservation of public lands. What's going on the public lands front? You voted against your fellow New Mexican, Steve Pearce, as the head of the BLM. Can you explain your rationale, and what are you expecting out of him there at BLM?
I've known Steve Pearce for decades, and one of the fundamental reasons why, and I told him in my office that I'm happy to work with him, but given his history of wanting to sell off the public lands, that's a non-starter for me. And I think it's an example of where this administration, and to some extent, a substantial portion of the Republican Party, is out of step with especially average Westerners. Public lands are the one thing that we agree on from left, right, and center in my state. And that's kind of true all throughout the West. These are the places that we share with our relatives. We may not agree with our relatives on all sorts of political things. Everyone uses public lands. Everyone values that access. Everyone cares about those special places where they sat around a campfire with their best friends and their family. And this effort to just care about development with no balance and no conservation, to give away public lands. The administration gave away over 1 million acres of public land in Alaska recently to facilitate industry. It's deeply unpopular, and we saw that with the effort to sell off a bunch of public lands in budget reconciliation last year. And the blowback to that was just as much on the right as it was on the left and the center.
There was an interesting left-right unification on that front. It's very interesting to see public land advocates in Montana, Republicans come out against that. How concerned are you about another effort that, Senator Mike Lee's that come after public lands again in another reconciliation bill, potentially this fall in this third bill that they're talking about?
Well, I think we have to take that very seriously because we've seen it again and again. This is something that sort of rears its head every decade or so, and there are interests who want those public lands transferred from public hands into private industry hands. And we can responsibly develop public lands without ever divesting of those public lands. The public should have a say. And one of the places that really frustrates me is This administration doesn't seem to care about local communities' voice in any of this. So whether that's the boundary waters in Minnesota, whether that's Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, just no consideration for places where a real consensus has been built in the local community for what the future of those public lands should look like.
You mentioned boundary waters, obviously a big vote last month, I believe.
Yep.
Are you prepared for similar actions to come from your Republican colleagues on this front, similar CRAs? And do you see that action by them as a precedent for future Congresses? It's
absolutely a precedent, and it's a terrible precedent. They basically changed the rules. CRAs were created as a legislative tool to deal with overreach in regulations, not land use plans, regulations. So this is a brand new way of them getting around the filibuster to be able to develop and give a Chilean mining company basically our copper so that they can send it to China, refine it, and sell it back to us with a tariff on top, ironically enough. It shows that lack of balance. And if there's a place where we should be cautious, my goodness, it's the boundary waters. I mean, it is such an impressive place. My family's been there. Teddy Roosevelt really worked hard to make sure that that was protected in perpetuity. And putting a copper sulfide mine right in the headwaters of that special place, I just think that's the poster child of not having a balanced, thoughtful approach to development in public lands.
I remember when I was covering this vote, I spoke to some Republicans, including Lisa Murkowski and Tom Tillis, who were warning that this could come back to bite them. That if Democrats regain control of the Senate and get the White House, they could potentially go after land rights, leases in Republican-controlled states. Is that something that you see happening?
Forest plans, you name it. I mean, this really opened what my former governor in New Mexico used to call a box of Pandoras. Like, there are going to be unintended consequences from this.
Historically, Western lawmakers have stuck together on this issue of Western lands. Do you see that as still the status quo right now, or is that changing in your mind?
I think it's changing. Things have become more partisan, but I do think there are still places where we can forge common ground. Wildlife corridors and crossings is a place that I've been able to work with one of the senators from Montana on. I've worked with the other senator from Montana on the Continental Divide. It should be the thing that brings us together, because I can tell you that all of us in the West who have public lands, the constituents who use those are completely across the political spectrum.
Yeah. Are you worried about this upcoming fire season and what that's going to mean for Congress policy here?
I am deeply worried. I mean, we're just looking at a Forest Service that has thousands fewer frontline staff than they did a year and a half ago. That concerns me. I'm seeing the numbers come back in terms of the acres treated for fuels reductions down something like 30%. That worries me. And managing our forests responsibly and preparing and preventing wildfire, those are not partisan issues in the West. This fire season, I think, has everyone losing sleep.
Yeah. Republicans have talked about adding wildfire aid into a reconciliation bill. Do you see that potentially happening? Could that sweeten the deal, perhaps to get your vote on something like Iran funding? That's what they've talked about, try to include it as part of a war funding package to help get some of these Western Republicans and also some Democratic votes there. Do you think that's possible?
I don't see, budget reconciliation is such a hyper-partisan tool that I think that's a heavy lift. And certainly the kind of irresponsible spending that we've seen on a war that the American people don't support, that is raising their gas prices and raising their diesel prices, and that diesel number is raising their grocery prices, that's a pretty big lift. I could not imagine voting for something like that.
Okay. You mentioned earlier...
And we shouldn't need a budget reconciliation bill to deal with emergency funding for wildfire relief.
Yeah, it should ride separately, as you're saying. You mentioned earlier these cuts at Interior. How are those going to affect, how we address things like wildfires in this country.
It makes us less prepared, and we just have fewer people on the ground. We also have the administration talking about moving the fire response from the Forest Service to Interior. I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea, but I sure as hell want to understand exactly how it's going to work before they pull the trigger. And I would hope that they wouldn't rearrange the deck chairs in the middle of a fire season. That's something to figure out ahead of time. Make sure you have fully vetted ideas, understand how everybody's going to fulfill their role before you ever make a decision like that. Because it has life and death consequences for my constituents.
I want to go a little big picture. You've been in Congress since 2009, and the Senate since 2013. Is it safe to say that congressional authority over issues like energy and public lands has weakened in that time? Do you feel like it's gone down?
I think it's gone down, and that's the fault of Congress. We should take those prerogatives back. We should be more assertive and shouldn't roll over for any administration. One of my frustrations is in a lot of these votes, the boundary waters is a great example. I can have a conversation with one of my Republican colleagues and they see the policy for what it is until the White House gets involved. And then they're willing to cede that power to this president. I think the Congress should be more assertive under any president.
Do you feel like you have any reliable partners on the Republican side on this?
No, I do. Tom Tillis, unfortunately, he's going to be moving on. But like I said, I've been able to work with Jim Risch in Idaho. I don't know a member more conservative than Jim Risch. But we worked on cleaning up abandoned mines together. We got that legislation across the finish line and signed into law. And now the Trump EPA is moving forward on cleanup projects. That's an example of if you're really dogged, you can still get things done in this place. And they're big things with real permanence.
What keeps you up at night in terms of energy and public lands? What are you worried most about right now?
I think it's the totality of an administration that seems to be effectively waging a war on the West right now. Like across the board, we're seeing attacks on our public lands. And at some point, this idea of full-scale selling those public lands off or giving them to industry, they've realized that that's toxic, but that they can pick off a piece here and a piece there and a piece there. And so now the totality of those pieces is fraying this fabric that really holds our country together.
What are you hearing about public lands conservation in New Mexico? Your advocates there, what are they saying? What's most important to them right now in your state?
It's a great contrast from Washington, D.C. I just had an event a few days ago with an incredibly broad set of stakeholders, from people who are permittees and have been ranching the land for a long time, to sovereign tribes, to local elected officials, all coming together around a landscape and saying, this place is part of our culture and our history. Let's preserve the best parts of this place. And that's legislation that we just introduced, but it's a result of that community figuring out what is their common ground, what are the things they can agree on, and then coming to myself and Senator Houlahan and their congressional representatives and saying, protect these values. This is what's important to us. And that's how we should be approaching these things here in DC as well.
It's hard not to, want to protect public lands. When you go to a state like New Mexico, the tagline is Land of Enchantment. It's gorgeous. It's absolutely stunning. If anybody hasn't been there, I would go there.
We welcome you.
Thank you. But I wanted to thank you so much for coming on. Before we let you go, we have a segment that's called 535 1 Minute.
Okay.
Basically, it's a short segment. We're going to ask you a rapid fire set of questions. They can be very hard. You ready?
Okay. All right.
Are you prepared?
I'll do my best.
Okay. What is the best part of being in Congress?
When you get something big done, it's durable.
It's durable?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, if you pass legislation, it usually sticks around for a long time. You create a new national monument or a new national park, that's something that goes into the history books.
What is the most difficult part about being in Congress?
Probably being completely out of control of your own schedule.
You have a schedule for that.
But it changes all the time, and unless you're the leader, You're not going to control that.
Well, thanks for joining us here for this long. If you can fix one thing about Congress, what would it be?
Oh, just getting people to spend time together, because that's the stuff that leads to bipartisan solutions.
Where can you find the best food in your state?
Anywhere somebody makes red chili from scratch.
Red chili, not green chili.
That's my preference. Carne adobada. Start with an elk shank.
Yes.
That's my go-to.
Elk shank.
Yes.
All right, you're going too far west for me. What is the best committee assignment?
Energy and natural resources, of course.
Okay, that was an easy one.
Yeah.
Who is you can't say yourself on this.
Okay.
Who is the smartest member of Congress?
The smartest member of Congress. I think every member of Congress thinks that's themselves.
Oh, come on. Give me a name. Come on.
I think Tom Tillis is super smart.
That's fair. Who's your favorite person on the other side of the aisle?
I love working with Jim Risch, because if you can get Jim Risch and Martin Heinrich on the same piece of policy, there's a good chance it's going to become law.
And finally, what is your favorite phrase uttered here and nowhere else?
Do you think we're going to have a CR?
Yeah, well.
My constituents would have no idea what that is, but everyone in this town knows what
I think we're going to have a lot of CRs from now on, unfortunately. Well, Senator, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
For everybody else, we've got a great segment coming up for you. My fellow Notice co-stars and fellow stars, Daniela Diaz and Paul Kane, recently spoke to Representative Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey. He's going to be coming on to talk about what Congress is doing right, what policies that are working for America, who he likes to work with across the aisle. And stay tuned right after this break. It's going to be a fascinating conversation just like this one.
Thanks.
I work hard. My dad worked hard. That's where I got it from. What I take home is my future and my kids' future. And if I can invest in companies, they're going to reflect my principles, what I believe in. So why would those companies hire outside people to tell them to embrace principles I don't believe in? Congress must protect the financial future of Americans from the foreign-owned duopoly that answers to no one.
America's Vet Dogs is a national nonprofit empowering veterans, first responders, and active duty service members facing both visible and hidden disabilities through the placement of a highly trained service dog. However, recipients never bear the financial burden. You can be a part of making a meaningful difference in the lives of veterans and first responders in need. Learn more by visiting vetdogs.org.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
535.
You're watching 535.
535.
535.
535.
We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
We're back on 535. Joining us now, Congressman Josh Gottheimer, Democrat from North Jersey.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
I'm excited.
What was the very first bill that you got signed into law?
So I was in Congress a couple months. So I started got here January 2017. Interesting time, right? Beginning of the first Trump administration, and very focused on helping veterans. And I got an amendment passed to help post 9/11 veterans at the VA, because one of the biggest problems was there weren't people who were younger that younger veterans could relate to at the VA. We knew this was an issue. It talked about it on the campaign trail, and so we got it done.
How tough was it? What were the processes that you had to use as a freshman Democrat working in a Republican House with a Republican Senate and a Republican administration?
Well, you probably know this. I came in and I started working with Republicans right away, working across the aisle. I believe in that, still do. And so I started making friends, both my freshman class, because they do a lot of orientation together, of folks on the other side, people like Mike Gallagher, who's not here, but others, and went right to work. And I found some Republicans to work with, and were able to get it done.
Why has the place broken down so much that you are stuck in a situation where you're at the last second, not even the last second, because we're already 40 some days past on this issue, that it's passing in the dark of night, literally at 3 a.m. Why broadly? Talk about what's gone wrong here in almost, the almost 10 years you've been here.
It's, people when I got here said it was broken compared to how it had been. And I worked here years ago. So it is, there are a few major things that have accelerated, right? Social media keeps accelerating, as well as obviously not just you had cable news, but now you have shows like this. You have lots more content for people to be able to weigh in on different issues. And that's changed the velocity, a pace of information. And because of social media and the way it's structured, we all know that people are broken into smaller niche communities than ever before. So people get worked up all over the place. It makes it harder for them to come together and find common ground. And the incentive structure for actually finding agreement and governing the way we used to, right? Meaning you got to give a little bit to get, right? Take 80% of a solution and get the other 20% the next time. It's moved much more for many members to an all or nothing solution every time. And so they want everything. And it's hard to get everything if you try to get an agreement. And and then what happens? You get attacked. If you give a little, you get attacked for it. So and then you've got the entertainment problem. You've got people who are, I would say to new members when I sit down with them and say, you got to make a decision. Do you want to be a workhorse or do you want to be a show horse? They're very you got to decide. Doesn't mean you can't come on and talk to the media, and of course you should. But is that what's driving your decision every day? What's on you put on Twitter, or is what drive you getting a piece of legislation across the finish line and being willing to sit down and build relationships with your colleagues across the aisle?
How many of the various new media outlets, the new ways of cable TV, how many of those give you a platform to actually talk for a few minutes about your favorite policy positions?
Very few. You don't really, if there's not a fight, you all are usually not interested. You're interested in the fight. You can talk about policy if there's a fight. And that's when you can get reporters somewhat interested. I've had many times where I've been working on an agreement behind the scenes for months on a big piece of legislation, and we have a breakthrough, and I'm like, oh, this is amazing. This Republican and I worked together, we got this done. And a reporter will say to me, that's incredible, you were able to pull that off? I'm like, yeah, you want to talk about it? They're like, no, it's very process policy oriented. But no, it's great, but it's much more interesting about who you want to insult.
We are here to help change that. Yeah. You've got your platform. What's the first bill you want to work on in a Democratic Congress if you guys win back the majority? What's the first thing you want to work on, policy-wise?
So I'm co-chair of a new commission on AI, and I've been spending hours every day on this. I've been last Congress there was a bipartisan committee on AI. The speaker and the majority decided not to re-up that committee, and so we decided to go ahead and do it ourselves on our side to actually have a perspective on something that's affecting really every aspect of life, and will continue to, and that's only accelerating, right from energy policy to education to deepfakes to water to energy to pretty much to workforce issues, you name it, to healthcare. Our lives are going to continue to change because of AI, and Congress has a significant role to play in all that. So you're going to see a major package early in the Congress of smart AI legislation.
Who are some of your partners?
We've got, from the bipartisan way, it's all over the place. From the Albernotti, who was the chair of the AI committee last Congress. I work with Mike Lawler and others, but also plenty of Democrats. And Ted Lieu and Valerie Foushee and I are the three co-chairs of this commission. We had a meeting this morning, actually. It is, to me, incredibly important that we actually have a perspective on something that is going to continue to have a massive impact on our lives and affect nearly everything that we do around here.
I hear a lot about AI regulation. It's a huge topic here on the Hill. Specifically, what will this legislation do? If you can go into maybe some examples or details that we could see.
Sure. I'll tell you things that are on the table without revealing where we are and everything. And I've got a bunch of bills on myself on everything from energy to water to workforce issues to retraining, But let me just say, broadly speaking, the big topics, of course, are preemption that you hear talked about a lot. Should there be a federal framework, or should this be state by state? What kind of accountability and transparency measures should there be when a platform like ChatGPT or when Anthropic comes out with a new rev? Like, what kind of testing should there be? Should it be a centralized testing? What about deepfakes? There's been some legislation passed and now law, to be able to take down a deepfake. But what about, should there be any watermarks required? So that you know something is genuine about you guys, somebody spoofing you, or an elected official, or doing something that was, obviously a child predator thing and other things that could be, some of the worst stuff that can be done. It's been out there, right? What are you going to do about that? Then you have energy policy. Your utility bills are up 45% in the last 20 months in New Jersey, right? That's insane. As more data centers are built, should AI platforms and companies, should they be responsible for producing their own energy or paying for it and making sure that your bills don't go up? What about education? How's that going to change? And healthcare, there's amazing things that can happen with healthcare. We can look at scans of Paul and say, oh, we see something here, but that there's 1,000 other people who have the same exact makeup, and that's okay, actually, what I see there, right? Or
I'm really unique. I'm one of a kind. I don't think there's 1,000
one of
like
a kind. One of a kind. And so, you think so. Then there's agents, right? There's agents all over the place. Do the agents work for you? Or is that agent actually working for United Airlines and it's their agent? Are they actually looking for the best price for you? Or are they they're looking at your behavior and saying, actually, I should afford to pay a little bit more. Let's charge a little bit more. Or really, you need to go on that flight so badly because we're looking at the rest of your life and know that you have to travel. So I could probably charge you a little bit more. So is that right? And then things like, if you get advice online, on financial advice online, does that agent have a fiduciary responsibility to give you the best advice, or is it working for Charles Schwab and thinking about, right? And right, so you could think about all the various things that come up just in that space, right? And all the privacy issues that come along, and so there's a million, and then all of the work issues, right? What are we going to do? Are there going to be enough jobs for everyone? Are there new kinds of jobs? What kind of different training should we have? So those are just a few of the ones that we're thinking about, and we have to have a perspective on that.
Can you speak to optimism you might have about maybe things changing around here when it comes to not focusing on the actual policy issues that matter and it being about politics? Are you optimistic that things could change at some point?
I'm hopeful things can change.
Yeah.
Well, I helped start up this group called the Problem Solvers Caucus. You guys know, for years ago when I first got to Congress. Now I'm vice chair after serving as many terms as a chairman. And because I really believe that we still need to figure out how to work together and get things done. You still have things that we actually have to do, right? Now, the problem is everything usually now is with a gun to our head and everything is last minute. But there's still other things like permitting reform and other issues that I think we can find good bipartisanship around and solutions. And we have to be able to use those muscles. And so, yeah, I still am optimistic because I still do it. I mean, I just worked for the last month and barring some things that, changed at the last minute, we had some really strong agreement about where we need to go. And that's because of relationships. And I can pick up the phone and talk to a bunch of Republican senators and Democratic senators. And same thing here. And I'm hopeful that enough new members of Congress who come in take the time to build those relationships and don't just want to be entertaining, right? And I don't knock people. That's their choice. They can do what they want. I'm still old school that way and believe in the Constitution, our responsibilities, and of what we got to get done. And so I'm hopeful, but I'll tell you, there's less incentive these days, unfortunately, to do the kind of stuff that I do than to fight.
What was your first job and how much did you get paid?
Well, I'll tell you my dad had a store. So all growing up, we worked in the store. I worked in the store behind the counter, selling like candy and toothpaste and that kind of stuff. And I don't really remember getting paid, but he paid me like in my allowance. I don't exactly remember what my allowance was because it changed over time. But so I used to get an allowance, and then he started paying me like as I got older a little bit. Um,
Did you ever threaten a strike against your
and then he helped me plenty and, put food on the table. And so whatever they needed, I would do. Whatever my dad needed, I would do. But my next favorite job was scooping ice cream at Ben & Jerry's, which, by the way...
My sister did that.
Oh, really? It's the greatest job.
Ben & Jerry's, too?
Yes. It's hard. It's hard, but everyone is happy when they're getting ice cream. Like, people are just happy. And I was obsessed
Favorite
with
flavor?
it. Obsessed with it.
That's a great question.
That's a great question. Jerry Garcia?
All right. Well, that's really liberal for a moderate centrist Democrat.
Do they make any more moderate flavors? I don't think they have a moderate flavor.
Not from Vermont.
Do they? They don't have like a mansion marshmallow or something.
All right, everybody. This is 535. Josh
you.
Gottheimer, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
America leads the world in medicine development.
It matters.
We get new medicines first, nearly 3 years faster.
5 million Americans go to work because we make medicines here at home.
And not relying on other countries keeps us safe.
But China is racing to overtake us.
Will we let them?
Or will we choose to stay ahead?
When America leads,
America cures.
Let's tell Washington to keep us in the lead.
We are Lions International, one association of global volunteers, one foundation for humanitarian grants, shaping the future, one act of kindness at a time. We are on a mission to improve health and well-being, to strengthen communities, to serve a world in need. We are Lions International.
To learn more, visit lionsclubs.org.
Welcome back to the 535. I'm Brody Mullins. Today we have Mike Sommers, President CEO of the American Petroleum Institute. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you, Brody.
Let's get right to the news. Inflation up 3.7%. How much of that are people going to blame you for?
Well, a very significant part of that was an increase in gas prices that has occurred as a consequence of the Strait of Hormuz being functionally closed for over 2 months. So a lot of this has to do with international turmoil. When you cut off 20% of the global oil supply, you're going to have an increase in prices at the pump for Americans. We're somewhat shielded from that here in the United States because we're the world's largest oil and gas producer. But at the same time, something that happens in the Strait of Hormuz is going to affect prices at the pump for American consumers.
And what is your message to members of Congress who I think are going to turn around and probably hold you accountable for that?
Well, I think most people understand that when you cut off 20% of global supply, that is going to have an effect on prices. You know, one thing that hasn't been affected, which is a really important point here, is natural gas prices. You know, what we use to heat our homes and of course, cook our food in many places. Natural gas prices haven't gone up at all. And the reason why they haven't gone up at all is because we have a regional market structure here. So you have natural gas prices going up all over the world because they get significant amounts of natural gas in other parts of the world from the Middle East. Here in the United States, it's a homegrown product and we make it here at home and they haven't moved at all. And I think that's a reflection of how important it is to continue to develop the resources here in the United States. We're insulated on the gasoline side because we produce so much, but for natural gas, it's a complete and utter insurance policy.
Mm-hmm. So President Trump is not going to want to take the blame for this. He's one who tends to sort of throw punches. How do you think he's going to react to these new high prices?
Well, I think the bottom line is that the worst thing that could have happened is if we had a Strait of Hormuz that was under threat of a nuclear weapon from Iran. So the president taking the bold action to ensure that they don't have a nuclear weapon that they could use to keep the strait closed forever, I think was an important geopolitical move. At the same time, we can't allow the strait to remain closed for a long period of time. It's just too much supply, not just in oil, but on natural gas, on fertilizer, and on a lot of other products that the world uses on a daily basis.
Let's move to another topic in the news. This weekend, Secretary Wright said on Face the Nation that he would consider a gas tax holiday. President Trump announced yesterday that he would consider something also. Josh Hawley has a bill on this topic. Where do you guys stand on a federal gas tax holiday?
Well, look, it's only about 18 cents a gallon. That would provide short-term relief for the American people. But 51% of what you pay at the pump is crude oil prices. So as long as crude oil prices remain high, you're going to have elevated prices at the pump. There's no substitute for getting the Strait of Hormuz open and opened fast.
Another potential solution is permitting reform. Where do things stand? This permitting reform bill seemed like sort of a no-brainer earlier this year. It was bipartisan. Everyone seemed to say that permitting reform is a good idea. Yet here we are in May, the August recess is upon us. Where do things stand?
We still think that there's a possibility to get bipartisan, bicameral permitting reform done in this Congress. The truth of the matter is that energy prices are rising. Your electric bill is rising. Of course, gasoline prices are rising. We need a solution that is going to provide certainty for the American people. And really the only thing that politicians can do to address this price issue is improve the permitting system in the United States at the federal level. I do think the Trump administration has done everything that they can do at the administrative level to get these pipelines in particular approved, but unfortunately, you have to change federal law to do it. I was pleased to see that your most recent guest here, Senator Martin Heinrich, he's in the room, he's working on this, he wants to have a bipartisan solution. I think we're very close. We're closer than we have ever been, but now is the time for Congress to get it done.
What do you think the timeline is for the Senate to get something done or to pass something this year?
I think they have to get it done before the August recess. I think we all know that once they go into the August recess, it's political season, and it's going to be very difficult to get this back done and get people to understand how important this is when politics take control. So I really think end of July is the time frame.
So you mentioned politics taking control. That was actually my next question. You were quoted in a Wall Street Journal story a few months ago that was fascinating, saying, if you think that permitting reform is hard to get done now, just wait until the Democrats control the House of Representatives and possibly the Senate. You still stand by that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think it's going to be very hard to get something done to the president's desk if the House of Representatives flips into Democratic hands. The players are just not going to be the same, and it's hard to see a scenario if Democrats were going to take control that Jared Huffman, as head of the Resources Committee, for example, is going to advance permitting reform that's for all of the above. That would include oil and gas and transmission lines and permitting for wind and solar as well.
There was a holdup for a while that President Trump, because he disdains the wind industry, didn't want wind to be part of the permitting reform package. Where does that stand now? Has he been persuaded that he needs to let go of that?
Look, our view is that you're going to need all sources of energy if we're going to power the future. And that means wind, that means solar. Those are intermittent sources. You're also going to need sources like natural gas that provide energy 24/7. So all of these are going to be part of the mix, and all of them have to be included in a bipartisan permitting bill.
And that means we've got the oil and gas industry and the wind industry together now pushing forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's not an unusual coalition. We have been together pushing this for years and years because they understand how important hydrocarbons are going to continue to be for our economy, and we understand that we're going to need every electron and molecule on the grid.
You've got a newish advertising campaign out there. Can you talk about that and what you've been working on?
Yeah, so one of the big things that we're focused on is, of course, permitting reform here in the Beltway. So we have a campaign that we call America Builds, America Wins, which is our top focus here in the Beltway. But we also do national advertising as well. You're familiar with the show Landman, which is the #1 streaming show in America. So we've been the #1 sponsor on Landman for the last 2 years, and we're proud of that partnership as well.
We're hoping to be the #2 streaming show on television not too long.
You're almost there, Brady.
Let's talk about the Farm Bill and E15. To give us the background here, there's a vote coming up that's incredibly important. Yep. What's going on here?
So I will say that this is a place where there is bipartisan consensus. So for a long time, the oil industry fought the ethanol and big agriculture, as they're so called, over the course of the last many years. I think we've both realized that there's going to be a lot more ethanol on the market going forward. And we have real concerns about how the renewable fuel standard is currently being implemented. So what we're simply asking is that if they're going to get year-round voluntary E15, and again, it is voluntary, what we want is some reforms to the RFS program that's been in place for over 20 years. This is something that we've come together on, and we're hopeful that Congress passes it tomorrow.
You stole my last question, which was about Landman. So for folks who don't know, the American Petroleum Institute became a big sponsor, a champion of Landman before it even came on the air. Tell me about your risks or as an association trying to get out there on a new way of advocacy in Washington.
So I'm a huge fan of the Taylor Sheridan network of shows, right? From everything from Yellowstone to Landman. And about 6 months before the show premiered, we were a little bit concerned as to how the industry was going to be portrayed in the show, particularly on the safety side. So we decided to advertise on the show, portraying how important safety is to the oil and gas industry. In fact, API isn't just an organization that does advocacy, we're also an organization that maintains safety standards for the global oil and gas industry. So our advertising on the first season of the show is all about the importance of safety to our industry. About 3 episodes into Landman, we realized that this show is going to be very positive for the industry. And come season 2, the producers actually came to us and asked us to continue advertising. And in the second season, we started talking about real landmen, the men and women who work in our industry to ensure that this industry remains safe and viable in the United States. So this season 2, we portrayed real landmen in the American oil and gas industry, and we've seen great success with that advertising campaign.
Should we expect a cameo of Mike Sommers or API on that?
There have already been a couple of API references, and we'll hope that will continue.
Let's talk about your time on Capitol Hill. You used to work not in this building, but very close. Not that long ago. So much has changed on Capitol Hill and in advocacy in terms of trying to get to members, trying to get to staff. What are the other new ways that you are communicating to try to get to members in this cluttered environment?
Well, one of the new ways is something that you're doing here. You know, starting a new streaming service like this. Podcasts are a new way that you reach people. We've found that actually going back to the old ways of doing things works too. So you see a lot of API billboards across not just Washington, D.C., but in congressional districts as well. I think members of Congress are so overloaded with information right now. Going back to the old ways of how you communicate, going door to door, talking to people and their constituents and affecting them back home is really the new way again.
Mike Sommers, CEO and President of the American Petroleum Institute, thanks for joining us. Appreciate
Great to be with you, Brody.
We're going to do a quick break here to swap out our guests. We'll be right back in a few minutes with Drew Maloney from the Edison Electric Institute. Thank you so much. Awesome.
Thanks, buddy.
Good.
Hope that was good.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
535. You're watching 535.
535.
535. 535.
We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
Drew Maloney from the Edison Electric Institute. Thanks so much for joining us.
Brody, great to be with you today.
So let's talk about another hot issue here, which is electricity prices. So electricity prices have been going up for a little while across the country. What sort of concern does that cause for you, and what are you telling your members?
Well, Brody, at EEI, we supply electricity to 250 million Americans in all 50 states. I think one of the important things to recognize, and we understand that everything has gotten more expensive recently, but I think one of the things that's really important is that when we looked at the 34 states across the country, they've allowed electricity rates to stay below the cost of inflation. So you really have to look at this at a state-by-state basis, but we are really focused on making sure that we are providing affordable and reliable power to all of our 250 million Americans every day.
You have a new advertising campaign. Tell us about that. When did it get started? And what message are you trying to relay?
Yeah, so we have our new campaign, it's the energy of every day. So what we're trying to remind our customers and American families out there is the value of what electricity is on a daily basis. So if you think about this, Brody, we now are bringing more than 20 devices into a home that need charging overnight or during the day. There's another 50 or so devices that include a refrigerator, fans, lights. All these things are needed to make sure that every day you're ready for that day. And I think we all take it for granted. And for basically the price of a bag of potato chips, that's what it's costing Americans to make sure that their power is on, their refrigerator is cold, they can read by light, they can charge their phones, they can do their homework, and we can have the bright lights here that we have right here in the rotunda.
So we hear a lot about AI and the coming power needs, the thirst that the AI industry has, that people say are going to increase electricity prices.
Right.
Have you seen that yet? How are you combating that? How do you deal with AI?
Actually, I think it's a real opportunity for America. One, we have to win this AI revolution. We're competing with China on it every day. We can talk about permitting and how important that is. But if you look across the country at the different states that have announced large data center additions, it's putting downward pressure on rates. So think about it this way. If you're renting a school bus to take a bunch of kids to prom, and you've got 10 people on the bus, and that's $100, and you're spreading that over 10 people. And then if you just add 10 more people, the cost is getting lower. So we've seen in states from Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Indiana, Arizona, Iowa, all these states that have announced recently deals with data centers, they've had rate freezes, they've given back money to customers over time. So I think this is going to be an opportunity where we can really double down on the electric grid that we have in this country and really create an enormous amount of growth that can be paid for largely by the AI data centers.
So before we get to some of the solutions, let's go backwards for a second.
Yeah.
So what is the root cause of prices going up then, of utility bills going up?
Well, if you look around the country, as I said, 34 states have kept rates lower. California is a higher state. Most of the cost there is wildfire mitigation. You have to bury lines, you have to protect them against wildfires. The Northeast and PJM, which is the Mid-Atlantic region, the challenges there are the electric companies don't own the generation. So we're in the spot market buying generation, and we just need more electrons on the grid. And that seems to be in a high growth environment where we are now, where we have AI data centers, where we have reshoring of manufacturing, and we have more electrification. It's this beautiful storm of more demand for power, and we just have to have more power on the grid, and that's the bottom line.
So there's a Washington Post story recently that had a poll saying that they thought prices were going to go up. You're saying 35 states have gone down, but the poll says that prices are expected to go up, utility bill prices are expected to go up into November. If that were to happen, who's going to be blamed? Will it be Republicans, Democrats, Trump, your industry, AI? Who will shoulder the blame for that?
Well, look, I don't know who's going to shoulder the blame. As I said, most of these rates are set at the state level. So in some states, it's state policies that impact how the rates will be impacted. All I can say is what we've been very focused on is trying to keep the rates as affordable as possible, but the real key is the reliability. I mean, if you think about the electrical grid, it's one of the three most innovative inventions that we've seen in the United States. So you can take the interstate highway system, the railroad, and the electric grid. The electric grid is the sort of the first 5% of GDP, but it powers the other 95%. So we have to continue to invest in that, and things have just gotten a little bit more expensive, but we are very focused on trying to, over a 20, 30-year period, keep those rates as low as possible.
One of your big issues is also permitting reform.
Yes.
Where do things stand on permitting reform? They seem to be stuck in the Senate for a while. How do you broker a compromise there?
Well, look, as we talk about affordability, up to 25% of energy costs are due to regulatory delays. So that's a huge problem. That if we can tackle affordability and start by just passing permitting reform. The other challenge that we have in the United States is if we're competing with China for global competitiveness, it can take them 1 to 2 years to build a transmission line or a generation facility. It can take us more than a decade. That's unacceptable. We have to speed that up. I'm confident that the House and Senate will come together and find a compromise. I've been doing this for a long time, I think 30 years now, Brody, and I've never seen an effort as broad as the current effort is to try to pass permitting reform. The number of groups that support it, the number of resources that are going in to try to pass permitting reform, this is sort of a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and I'm optimistic that we're going to get something done before the end of the year.
Let me put you on the spot with two questions. One is, for it to happen this congressional cycle, when does it have to move through the Senate?
Well, Brody, you've been around Washington long enough that nobody holds to timelines, but we have until the end of December. So we can move it during the summer, we can move it during lame duck, but there's always time before the end of the year.
And second question, put you on the spot. I know you don't want to do this, but if it's not done and Democrats take control, is it still possible? Is it still a priority? Well, obviously it's a priority for you. Could it still get done?
Look, I think it can. I think when you have end-of-year packages, if that's where we end up and we don't get it passed over the summer, I think a lot of people on both sides of the aisle look at clearing the decks. And sometimes this could be an opportunity to clear the decks and then move to sort of another agenda going into the next Congress.
Great. Drew Maloney, President and CEO of the Edison Electric Institute, thanks so much for joining us.
Brody, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Right after the break, we'll be back with Leanne Caldwell, who sits down with the co-chairs of the bipartisan House Paid Family Leave Coalition. Thanks so much. We'll be right back. Thanks, buddy. Sorry about that.
90 seconds.
In Afghanistan, the IED actually penetrated the vehicle between my legs, but it was a miracle that we all survived in the vehicle.
When I began the process to separate from the military, it was during COVID. And with the issues back home, we just knew we got to come back home and take care of the family. So we had to go stay at our mom's house. And there was already 3 people living there and 5 of us, or 8 people. How many bedroom? Like a 2-bedroom. Like a 2-bedroom house. We were desperate.
So then when we transitioned to Texas, it was very much so like, what are we gonna do now?
When I came home, I needed a new roof due to a storm, and I was about to lose homeowners insurance as well. I applied for Operation Homefront Critical Financial Assistance Program. They've really been a blessing.
I'm in the Permanent Homes for Veterans program. They built a house for me, and it's amazing.
We got the call, this is your house, and the kids and I took off just to go sit in the driveway and cry. It's life-changing. It took us from a hopeless situation, and now we're homeowners. We have a savings account.
The best way to describe Operation Homefront is that it's like a family because they're always there for you.
I would say you guys are angels behind closed doors.
Operation Homefront has impacted my family in a way that's probably going to be passed down through my family's history. It's definitely going to be a story that's going to be told for generations.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
535.
You're watching 535.
535.
535.
535.
We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
I'm Leanne Caldwell with Puck News. And right now, our next segment is one I'm super excited about. I've been covering these two for quite a long time. A dynamic bipartisan duo, Oklahoma Congresswoman Stephanie Bice and Pennsylvania Congresswoman Chrissy Houlahan. Thank you both so much for being here.
Glad to be here.
So we've been talking for a couple years about this issue of family leave. You know, it's one of the most complex and perhaps challenging things to get through Congress. So you have a little bit of a development. There was a hearing recently on the issue, is that right? So
go ahead, Steph.
Congresswoman Houlahan, let's start with you. Tell me about how important it was just to get a hearing on this issue.
It's incredibly important, and it's a huge advancement because it comes with a Republican majority and the support of the Democratic Party as well. It's a bipartisan conversation in the official places that it needs to happen. And so we can talk all we want, you know, together about these issues, but it only happens just like Schoolhouse Rock. If there's a bill and we take a vote and it goes to the Senate and they say yes to, and the president signs it. And so the first step, as you might recall in your Schoolhouse Rock, is to go to committee. And that's an important conversation.
Yeah, it's the start of a conversation,
It's taken
right?
a long time to get here. Chrissy and I started working on this about 2.5 years ago.
Yep.
And it was, I think, deliberate and thoughtful. We took a lot of time bringing in different stakeholders to ask really deep questions about what they wanted to see. So many companies, multi-state companies, are offering paid leave, but it's really those smaller businesses that we were trying to figure out how do we fit them in a way that makes sense. And so we were really excited to be able to put something forward. It is bipartisan, and we're working on it being bicameral right now. And we look forward to putting this forward as quickly as possible to try to get a vote on it.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the details, because as we know, Democrats tend to want paid leave to be an entitlement. Republicans, it's not much of a priority for the party. So
I don't know that that's true. I mean, if you think back to the first Trump administration,
they did
there was
some
a
things
huge
around.
push by Ivanka Trump to actually put a paid family leave initiative in place. But the question is, how do you pay for it?
Yeah, so, well, first let's talk about, we'll get to the pay-fors. What are the policies? How could you guys come to an agreement on the policies? What were those
So
policies?
you're right in identifying that this is a enormously popular idea with the American people. Something like 70-80% of the American people would like to see a paid leave program for families or for medical purposes, and yet we are one of only 7 nations that doesn't yet have this program, developed nations that don't have this. And the devil is in the details. It is in the pay-fors, and it is also in the structure. And unfortunately, as we've been kind of screwing around with this, to use a phrase, to turn a phrase, it's been 33 years since the FMLA has been passed, and a lot of states, more than a dozen states, have passed their own legislation. So some of the ideas that we worked out on a bipartisan way in doing was to try to sort of create the opportunity for these states to be able to understand and learn from one another, a best practices sort of clearinghouse. So that's the I-plan aspect of the solution set. One of the 4 bills that we've introduced. Another one has to do with tax benefits and tax relief for companies that are doing it, which, as you could probably imagine, is a more popular solution space for the Republican side of things. Another is a sort of a public-private partnership where states get to have seed money, seed capital effectively, to be able to prime the pump for their paid program that they're implementing, as long as they participate in I-plan. And the last one is, as Stephanie was mentioning, Representative Bice was recommending smallest businesses. The smallest businesses struggle possibly the most with this, and creating a kind of a pooling situation for them to be able to be insured in groups is the final aspect of it. And we collectively don't care who solves this problem. We don't care, who gets the credit or those kinds of things. I'm grateful for all the help we can get, because we absolutely need more paid leave for more people, and that's our mantra.
So, Congresswoman, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I think for us too, sort of figuring out where the pitfalls were early on, which is why it was important to bring stakeholders in, and then understanding what states had already done. This proposal that we're putting forward, as Chrissy mentioned, is giving seed money to states, but it lets the states create their own plan, because every state is different. They have different needs. Some may want to do sort of a strict public-private partnership model. Some may want to do an insurance pooling model, but we're giving them the ability to create something that is unique to them. And I think that's what's going to be successful about this, is that it's not a federal mandate. It's not another entitlement program. It's really incentivizing the states to do something that we think should have been done 33 years ago.
So you mentioned the pay-fors, how you pay for it. Like, that's always the question on the Hill. And so what sort of ideas do you have?
We've actually come up with pay-fors for the bill. It's not a hugely expensive proposition.
What is the cost?
It's about $500 million, I think, is the latest number that,
Which sounds like an enormous number for the average person at home, but think about what it is that, exactly, what that it's literally buying us is the ability for people, families, to be able to have children, know that they have a period of time where they can bond and work with their family unit for a period of time. We were fortunate enough to be able to work this sort of solution out for federal employees. So now 2.5 million federal employees, all people in uniform, have this opportunity and this benefit. And we really want to make sure that all Americans have that opportunity.
So are the pay-fors controversial then?
No, I think we've actually agreed on all of them. We found little areas, that of funding that weren't either not necessary. For example, some funding that had to do with Afghanistan, with dollars. Those are pulled back. So there's ways that we were able to find money that is sort of dormant, if you will, or sitting out there, or not controversial pay-fors that will move this forward.
So what is the challenge then?
There's a lot going on in Washington right now.
Getting the attention of all of us in Washington when this is something that I think, as we've said, is enormously popular with people at home, but isn't necessarily in the top 5 or 10, on people's list here in Washington, which is, I think, unfortunate and a disservice to the people.
Have you been able to speak to Speaker Johnson about this?
I have spoken to all of the leadership as well as the White House, and we've been coordinating with the First Lady, actually. She's very passionate about family issues, and we recognize that. And so my office has been in contact with the First Lady's office to try to establish that sort of relationship and get some buy-in from the administration too.
And Democrats have been working on this for decades now, but we've also been socializing our office the idea that we got to start somewhere, and progress is progress. It's really, really important that we make progress.
How hard is that? Because there is a belief in the Democratic Party that there's an internal debate on many issues in the Democratic Party, whether it's perfection or it's incremental progress. Yep. So how What is the reception, I would say?
I think you've seen it in the fact that there have been hearings and that we've had the same conversations with the Rosa DeLauras of the world as you have had, with your leadership as well as with Hakeem and the leader Jeffries, for the same reasons. We really need to make sure that people understand we can't let another decade go by, another 2 years go by, another 5 years go by. We have a real opportunity, and if we believe that families are important, and we both believe, and both parties believe that, then we have to put our money literally where our mouth is and our policy where our words are. And that's what I think. I think we have an opportunity with what's left of this Congress.
You said that there is perhaps a bicameral possibility. So I know you're in the House, but what's the Senate doing?
The Senate actually is very excited about this. We've talked to a couple of our colleagues in the Senate side who are working on a couple of potential modifications, but they are willing to join us in this endeavor, and we're really excited about it. I think I'm going to keep that quiet for now.
I mean, it's a little bit more of a clandestine group of people who have been working on it with us, but we've been actively coordinating with them over the 2.5 years that we're working together, and it's a similarly tight group that is very much aligned with kind of the solutions that we have proposed. And so we're hoping that whoever throws the ball, somebody's there to catch it, whether it comes from the Senate at us, or we throw it to them, or the president's budget, or the president's office mandates it. That's how we got paid leave for federal employees. It went through the NDAA years and years ago. And so we're looking for any solution.
What's the timeline for the Senate? Do you know?
Pretty quick. I mean, we have a few things that we're trying to, loose ends we're trying to tie up, and I would expect in the next couple of weeks we may be able to have something solidified and a bill filed on the Senate side. But
affordability is such an issue for Americans. Being able to have the ability to stay at home with your child or an aging parent or whatever the familial situation is really plays into the affordability issue. Do you think that leadership is connecting it to that issue, and could something get done this year, do you think?
Well, I think today or tomorrow on the Senate side, the Aging Committee or Aging Subcommittee is having a hearing on the sandwich generation and affordability. That's another, kind of way of talking about this, is the people who are in the middle, who maybe have grandchildren or children that they're still taking care of, and parents that they're taking care of as well. It's absolutely an affordability conversation and an affordability crisis. Last week in the district, we had roundtables on this, visited child cares on this, talked to senior centers about this very issue. And so I do think that we collectively are having those conversations about why this is important. If I could spend 1 second more on the child care issue. If you're able to stay home 12 weeks with your child and your spouse is able to stay home 12 weeks with your child is 6 months old. That means that child enters daycare, if they enter daycare, 6 months older, which is important developmentally and for the family, but it's also a financial help as well. It's less money, exactly, and the child care provider ratio is lower too, so it's less. It's more efficient for the business as well. So this is a win-win-win for everybody if we can address this. So child care is very much tied to this
and
issue.
I think on the affordability front, one of the things that maybe doesn't get talked about that was part of the Working Families Tax Plan, now formerly the Big Beautiful Bill, was an increase in the flexible spending account. Flexible spending had not been increased in decades. It was a $5,000 cap for families that were looking to spend dollars on things like childcare or after-school programs, and so that's been increased to $7,500. We'd like to see that increase even more, and maybe have an inflation adjustment as well, because we recognize that that number hadn't been changed in quite some time. These are things that can be really, I think, have a huge impact on families. And as Chrissy said, this is really a nonpartisan issue. Families are important on both sides, and we need to figure out a way to help
nonpartisan issue.
To help move that.
It should be a no-brainer, and it's important that people in our leadership positions on both sides of the aisle hear the hue and cry of us down at, in our levels. It's
I think it
what's
takes
important.
the moms sort of raising the flag a little bit and saying, hey, we have a problem here.
My oldest is 33. She was born the year of FMLA. She has a one-year-old. She's pregnant again. Her child care costs this year $22,000 for one child. We have a crisis.
Yeah. I remember speaking to you in your office first about this a couple of years ago, and you talked about COVID and kind of how It was really eye-opening for a lot of your constituents and for, I mean, you probably believed this before, but how important it was for women being able to get back into the workforce.
Absolutely.
And so can you talk a little bit about that and how this group came together?
Well, I think we learned a lot during COVID, and for especially my constituents back in Oklahoma, the challenge was many of the moms were working outside the home and had to leave their jobs to be able to stay home with children that were now being schooled at home. Mm-hmm. And what happened was twofold. One, you had a lot of child care providers that were shutting down, in-home child care providers that could no longer actually take care of kiddos. So you had those people that were no longer able to sort of fill a need, and then you had professional women that were working, that were leaving their careers to go back and stay at home with littles to take care of them during that time. It was a double whammy, and we realized that impact is actually an economic impact, huge economic impact on the community, but also on the family. And so we were thinking through what are our options here. And as Chrissy mentioned, we had worked on expanding leave for service members and recognized the importance of that. And then we thought, well, we should really take a better look at paid leave. And let me be clear, there's been a lot of people that have done, I think, yeoman's work in trying to figure out how to make this happen. On both sides of the aisle. We've never gotten there. And so I think that for the two of us, there's a little bit of tenacity and don't take no for an answer. We want to keep pushing forward and we want to see this done. And so it's, for part of the last several months, it's been an education process for us, meaning it's our responsibility to go talk to our colleagues, to talk to leadership, to talk to the administration, to tell them why this is such a big deal and try to move it forward. And for me, selling it to my colleagues, why this is a good idea, what the benefits can be to a family, what the benefits are to community, the economy, businesses, is really important.
Given the political environment and political dynamic right now, is it for Democrats potentially, possibly on the precipice of taking back the House, which would be a divided government next year? Do you think that could actually be beneficial for something like this, where partisan legislation just won't happen?
I hope so, but I also am realistic about that. One of the fears I have is that if Democrats are in the majority, that we will overreach and again not get something done that's practical. We did have that opportunity to work with, and I was one of the folks who worked with Ivanka and with the first Trump administration and with the Armed Services Committee and with a variety of different people to get that paid leave for people in federal employment. And that happened because compromises were willing to be made. And we cannot just say as a group, oh, well, we're in the majority now and it's our way or the highway. No team should do that. So I'm hoping that we have the opportunity, when and if we're in the majority, to take ourselves seriously and get something done. But frankly, I still have hope for the rest of this term that something will happen.
There was a big story in the New York Times recently about how some companies are scaling back their own parental leave policies. What is your reaction to that? And does that present an opportunity or actually a bigger challenge for you all?
Well, it's certainly something that actually Chrissy flagged for me that was, I think, surprising that companies would be pulling back on that. But I think there's a couple of things that come into play here. Another provision of the Working Families Tax Plan was the ability for businesses to actually take a deduction, a larger deduction, if they were willing to provide paid leave for their employees. And looking at that as well as the benefit that company sort of loses if from a retention perspective. It's a big deal. I mean, companies are competing for great talent right now, and if this is if you are a young person in a position that you want that ability, and now your company's taking it away, well, then you're going to start looking around, and that's why I think it's so crucial for us to get paid leave programs across the country, because in some states there isn't one from a state standpoint. And so putting this together gives employees the ability to sort of look around and say, what's the best fit for me and my family? If you are not of childbearing age, that may not make a difference to you, but if you are, it's something that these families are going to take into consideration when applying for or leaving a job.
Definitely disappointed with those companies that have made that decision. I think that people who work with them, for them, will probably walk with their feet take their feet and walk somewhere else. I think it's a bad choice, and I've expressed that to those companies.
You did?
Yes.
What was their reaction?
Well, we hope to have them come and actually be face to face. Their reaction was largely one of the economy, and I think that is a vicious circle that you can get yourself into if you cut benefits and then wonder why your employees are leaving. That's right.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, you both are mothers. Did you have any sort of paid leave when you had your...
You go first.
I love this story, though, from
yeah.
Chrissy's perspective. Yeah. I did, and I didn't recognize or realize how unique that was. 25 years ago, my oldest daughter's 25, and I was given 8 weeks paid leave. And thought that was sort of normal and didn't realize that was very unusual that long ago. And so I'm very fortunate that I had that blessing to be able to stay home with not just my first daughter, but my second as well. And then I meet Chrissy, and her story is really pretty remarkable.
So I was in the military when I had my first child, and I had 6 weeks of convalescent, care. It wasn't maternity leave. It was you were sick. That sick, exactly. And the child care wait list for the base child care was 6 months long. So that's one of the reasons, to be terribly honest, that I ended up separating, is I couldn't figure out how to string those things together. And my husband got 2 weeks of leave from his business, and so that just didn't work for us.
Oh, wow. So, amazing stories. Thank you for bringing your personal perspective into your policy today. We have just a little bit of time, and I want to do some quick 1 minutes for you. Okay, Congresswoman Bice, I'm dying to know, who do you think the smartest smartest person on the Hill is?
I have to say Tom Cole. He is
Really?
my delegation member. He is a historian. He is a wealth of knowledge and perspective, not only about the history of Congress, but history in general, and such a delight. And so Tom is probably my pick for maybe the smartest man in Congress.
Oh, what about you?
So I'm going to give the politic answer to this, which is there are remarkable people here in Congress. And I'm very serious about that. It's not boring, because one of the things I've realized is that
most people don't think members are very smart up here.
Untrue. We've got people who are AI people, doctors, educators, engineers, and that's the thing. People who come from a historic background, former Black Panthers. It's an amazing cast of characters who are here. So it would be hard for me to quantify who's the smartest.
You didn't say Hakeem Jeffries for the leadership or for the committee position you want in the next
I'm a lot smarter than that.
Oh my gosh. Congresswoman Stephanie Bice, Congresswoman Chrissy Houlahan, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
And thank you for joining 535. We'll be right back after a quick break with a couple more amazing segments, including with my colleague Mariana Sotomayor, who is speaking with Representative Linda Sánchez. And later on, we will have Congresswoman Bice's favorite, most smart,
good
Representative Tom Cole. We'll be right back.
Mike's cut. Great.
Okay.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for you.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rome. I've played many roles on TV and film, but today I want to speak to you as myself about a cause that's very dear to my heart. The Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund provides free help to those who have cancer and those who wish to prevent it. They've also worked tirelessly on banning cancer-causing chemicals in our homes and neighborhoods. I want to thank them as a mom for protecting our families. Please donate today at the Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund at stopcancerfund.com.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
535. You're watching 535.
535. 535.
535.
We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
There are moments that shape an organization's future. A policy shift, a crisis or investigation, a market shock. When that moment hits, the clock starts. Markets move in minutes. Regulators, employees, and customers respond instantly. Narrative helps leaders respond with pace, engage stakeholders with precision, and position brands with perspective. So when challenges emerge, you can navigate complexity and lead with clarity before the narrative is defined for you.
From childcare to hospice care to immigration to trade, there is no issue I don't think that Congresswoman Linda Sánchez has not drafted a bill for. I'm so glad that you are on our inaugural show today, and there's so many topics, so many things I want to talk to you about.
Yes.
And actually get into the policy, if
okay.
you can believe it.
I love it. I love it.
I wanted to start just talking about, Leanne just talked to two of your colleagues about childcare. And it is an issue that I know you hear about back home. It's something that we as reporters hear from lawmakers all the time, yet you rarely see votes on this. You have a bill also with Congresswoman Bice,
yes.
the Child Act. Let me get this right. It would double the annual contribution limit for dependent care costs from $5,000 to $10,000 for families. Tell me a little bit about this bill. Why is it so critical at this time?
Sure. Well, childcare is incredibly expensive. I'm a single mom. I know this because I've lived it. I have a crazy schedule, and finding affordable quality childcare is very difficult. It's about 1/5 of every working family's budget, and it costs more to send a child to childcare than it does a year of tuition at a UC school in California. So it's very expensive. This particular bill that I'm co-authored with Representative Bice would double the amount that you can have taken out of your paycheck pre-tax into your federal savings account. Right now you can put away about $5,000 tax-free to use for childcare. It would double it to $10,000 to make it a little more in line with what the real cost is. So that's just one of the childcare bills that I have authored.
Just one of them.
Yes.
And remind me, you introduced this last Congress, right? Was that the first time you put this forward? So now it's another Congress that you've reintroduced this into. Do you think that this could be tucked in anywhere this year, or it might be something that maybe a House Democratic majority might prioritize?
Well, we try to build momentum, and so it's all about trying to build momentum within both the Democratic and Republican side.
Yeah.
Childcare is really a big, as I said, part of a working family's budget, and with rising grocery costs and gas costs, families are just really struggling. So it is something we need to get our hands around if we're going to have the workforce that we need. And so my hope is that we can address it sooner rather than later.
Yeah. You have another bill, as you teased already,
Yes.
with Congresswoman Carol Miller, also a Republican from West Virginia. You noted the importance of having to work in a bipartisan manner to try and get these things done.
Yes.
A little bit about that bill. Essentially what it would do if it became law would address the nationwide childcare shortage by helping offset costs of employee wages, incentivize higher pay for workers who care for children. This is almost one of those job sectors. Teachers kind of fall into this too.
Yes.
You kind of forget about them unless you are a parent who are, again, thinking about childcare, thinking about their kids going to school, making sure that they are getting just the best person to take care of them.
Yeah.
Those jobs don't pay well.
No, sadly, childcare pays very low wages, and that's why you see so much turnover and such a lack of availability. There's not a lot of people that go in that field and stay in that field. So what it would do is provide a tax credit to the employer only for the childcare provider's wages. So they couldn't use it for administrative costs or anything else. It would be to make sure that the wages are high enough that people will stay in that job, and that they will be able to support themselves while providing a service that's very greatly needed for working moms.
How would you make sure, you mentioned the fact that this would not go to those administrative costs, right?
Correct.
Sometimes we do see policies introduced, great intention, but then there is some abuses to the system. You've obviously thought ahead and put those provisions in.
Yeah, definitely. There would be auditing of it to ensure that the money was going to employee wages and nothing else.
Okay. So, go ahead.
No, so it would help, incentivize people to stay in in that career field and make it, you're kind of addressing it from the, the employee side of it, not just the family side of it. We need it to be more affordable, but we also need to make sure that those employees are making a living wage.
Have you seen any momentum with this piece of legislation among Republicans? Because, I mean, you've been there on the floor so many times. I've been watching over some of the debates. A consistent thread for many of those fiscal hawk Republicans is, well, we don't want to put money in places that, there could be waste, fraud, and abuse. We don't want to continue to give money, or at least the federal government paying for childcare, certain issues like this. I mean, I'm sure your colleague Carol Miller might have to do a little bit more convincing to her colleagues than you on the Democratic side, but it seems like it's a hard group to convince.
It is, because they are not the ones typically that struggle with that. I'm just going to be honest here. We had a hearing on childcare. This was several years ago, and I overheard one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle mutter under his breath, "Can't the grandparents just watch the kids?" Well, both of my parents had Alzheimer's, so no, they're not in a position to watch, my children while I work. And many other families, the grandparents don't live in the same state, it's just not feasible. And I don't know what kind of Leave It to Beaver world they grew up in, but that's not the case now. In my district, both parents have to work outside the home in order to make ends meet. And so for them, it's not a pressing issue because they haven't had to live the difficulty of trying to juggle working outside the home and caring for kids at the same time. But I think that the women are starting to pick up that thread on the Republican side, and they're starting to work with Democrats because it is something that affects our workforce. If you don't have stable childcare, you can't be a stable employee. And economically, it makes sense to make those investments so that people stay in the workforce.
It seems like definitely an issue you're all going to have to keep convincing. Different life experiences, different districts that you all come from.
Yes.
Another issue that actually I don't hear about that often, but is so important and frankly something that many people may face one day is hospice care. Truly, I don't hear about that policy often.
Yeah.
You've introduced something with Senator Mark Warner, a Democrat from Virginia, essentially strengthen the Medicare hospice benefit. I'll be completely honest, I didn't even know that there was a benefit that Medicare was offering. If you could tell our viewers a little bit about what that is and how what you are doing or what this bill would do would help strengthen that.
So there is a hospice benefit when you're towards the end of life care, when you have perhaps a terminal disease and you've reached the point where staying in the hospital is not going to make you better, and you want to, be at home with your loved ones in your final days. You can access this benefit. There have been instances, however, of fraud in that system, and so the bill really strengthens some procedural things to make sure that if you choose the hospice benefit that you've signed up for, that people are notified so that you know ahead of time, so somebody else isn't using your benefit. But it's a way to sort of allow people the dignity to choose how they want to exit this world. Mm-hmm. And most people choose to spend it at home with loved ones rather than connected to tubes in a machine in a hospital. And that's a choice that people should have when they're facing a terminal disease. So I'm very tuned into it because, as I said, both my parents suffered from Alzheimer's, both passed from Alzheimer's, and so we learned about all these things because we had to. And one of the things I don't think we do a good enough job of is educating people about what benefits are out there so that when they get to the point where they may need it, it's not a complete mystery to them, what do I do now?
Right. And again, talk about, because again, you thought ahead, about the potential fraud that has happened in this space. You wanted to address that, make sure that, the people who need to access this can. And again, try and fight back against that assumption that, there's waste, fraud, and abuse to strip out of every single provision that ever is introduced here on Capitol Hill.
Right. Well, no program is 100% perfect, but to try to take away such a necessary benefit because there are bad actors out there is not a solution to just say, well, this guy did this, and so we're not providing the benefit for anybody. And unfortunately, this current administration wants to really politicize it. They want to make it seem like only blue states have fraud in this system, which is not true. There's big cases of fraud in Texas, etc. And what they find is that bad actors sign people up for hospice care. People aren't even aware that their information is being used and that they've gotten this so-called hospice benefit. So like I said, in my bill, the person would be notified once that hospice benefit is accessed. So if they're not using the hospice benefit, they can say, hey, what's going on? And they can alert people to that there's potential fraud in the system. Okay. But again, it shouldn't be political. It should be a bipartisan effort to try to reduce that fraud and preserve that benefit for families who really need it.
Okay. Well, good luck on that endeavor. I know there's only so much time left this year.
Yes.
I did want to ask about immigration.
Yes.
You wear a different hat when you're outside of the Capitol. You are the chairwoman of Bold PAC, which is the Hispanic Caucus fundraising arm trying to recruit a number of candidates. But I want to bring up this issue specifically. Obviously, you're a Latina, so am I.
Yeah.
And we've just seen how much of the Latino community has been under attack or just
terrorized,
completely terrorized with what has been happening across the country for several months now. I don't have to explain to you that the Latino vote is not a monolith, and clearly it's a swing voting group. It's not reliable to one party.
Correct.
When it comes to immigration reform, this is a space that you have been active in for years.
Yes, for many years.
I mean, we'll see who gets the gavels in November, but there is a chance for Democrats to, again, take up this mantle of not just border security, but also immigration reform. Where do you start? Where do you start? And I know it's a huge, complex issue.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fact is that our current immigration system hasn't been updated in more than 30 years. And so the goals that we had for immigration 30 years ago are not the goals that we have necessarily for immigration now. We are an aging population. We need younger workers. So it makes sense to have immigration. And the economics of it are that immigrants pay far more into the system than they ever get in benefits out of it. Many people have this misconception that as soon as they land here, they can get SNAP benefits and health care benefits, and that's not true. They're not eligible. But people repeat that lie so often that Americans think, why are they getting all this free stuff and I get nothing? And that's not true. So we need to reform the overall system. We need, first and foremost, to hire more immigration judges so they can adjudicate cases faster and get the backlog through quicker. People should get an answer as to their immigration quickly. It shouldn't take years, and they shouldn't, it shouldn't be this long, drawn-out process. We do need to make investments, I think, in the push factors that push people to come here, namely working with some of the countries to our southern border to create a system where they can apply from within their countries and get the answers so they don't have to make that dangerous journey north and just show up on the border. We do need to make investments in, technology at the border to make the job easier for Border Patrol to do their job. We want the right kind of immigrants. Nobody wants criminal elements. So we want to separate out the people who want to come here to be reunited with their family or to work or, who don't have ill intentions from the criminal element so that we can make sure that our borders are safe. I will say this because this is a statistic that nobody likes to talk about, but native-born people in the United States commit crimes at a far higher rate than immigrants do. I know they like to take the one or two shocking examples and say all immigrants are criminals. That's patently false. It's not true. Native-born people commit more violent crimes than immigrants do. So that's not an excuse, although we do have to have good screening for immigrants. I have a bill, the U.S. Citizenship Act, which would do all of those things and also keep ICE accountable so that they can't wear masks or be unidentified or go into sensitive locations like hospitals and churches and schools to just grab people up without warrants and detain them. Sometimes they're detaining actual citizens. in Los Angeles, there are third generation Latino Americans that are terrified to go out because they're obviously Latino and they're being targeted because of the color of their skin. That has created a whole bunch of havoc among our small businesses and among our commerce, because if people don't go out to spend money or to go to work, it creates problems.
There's so many different issues to tackle here. One of the biggest challenges, and I know you've gone through this in past debates on whether it's immigration reform or frankly any other policy that the Democratic Party wants to get done. There's always the question of, do we let perfect be the enemy of the good? And I bring that up simply because there were so many other attempts in the past, over a decade, right? Different gangs that put things together, and it got so close to passing, even in 2024, right? The Senate had a proposal, and had those things been in place now, right? Maybe we wouldn't be seeing what we have seen the last several months. Maybe, DACA recipients would have protections. I mean, that's another angle to lawmaking, is sometimes you put these forward together, you debate it, it gets so close, and then you learn lessons from that.
We have had a number of bills, whether it's the farm worker bill or the Dreamer bill, specifically targeted to subgroups, not an overall huge immigration overhaul, which is what my bill does. But we have had bipartisan support, and we've negotiated with Republicans, and we get a bill that's acceptable. It's not perfect to each side, but it's acceptable. It would address a problem, and then the Republican leadership won't let it come to the floor for a vote. It's very disheartening when you put all this time and effort into something that's bipartisan and should be easy, and then their leadership says, no, we're not going to do it. And it's always the Republican leadership that kills these bills because they do not allow them to see the light of day for a vote. So,
what about even within Democrats? Because there's varying opinions.
Varying opinion, absolutely. And to craft a good immigration bill, you have to listen to everybody, and you have to try to come up with a product that's going to solve the problem. Again, not going to be perfect for every person, but it's going to start to get your hands around it, because what we cannot do is just kick the can down the road and do nothing. Again, no major reforms to immigration in more than 30 years. And it means that our system is just crumbling.
I heard that you were down for me to do some rapid fire questions. We're calling this the 5:35 1 minute, because us reporters, we love the 1 minutes on the floor. It's the magic minute that we're always bracing. We're like, how long are they going to go for? So 1 minute. We only have a couple minutes. What is the best part about being in Congress?
The best part of my job is when you're able to positively impact people's lives. And I'm going to mention one thing that I was able to do with the Affordable Care Act is get rid of gender rating, which is when health insurance companies used to charge women more for the same plan as a man just because of their gender. My amendment made that illegal.
What about the most difficult part?
Being a Californian, it's definitely the travel back and forth and the 3-hour time difference. It's really tough. It's really tough.
I hope you have a lot of miles that you can maybe one day use.
You do, but the last thing you want to do is get on a plane.
That's fair. That's
when you have
very
time
fair.
off. I'd rather take a road trip than get on a plane.
I've tried to do the red eye, and no.
That's brutal.
I can't. I'm like, I cannot. I feel like I can't show up for work.
It's brutal.
If you could fix one thing, what would it be?
For me, it would be childcare. Or, and I know this is more of a science thing than a legislative thing, find a cure for Alzheimer's.
Okay, interesting. Do you have a bill for that as well?
No, well, I have several bills relating to caregiving and Alzheimer's,
Awesome. Okay, it might be hard, but where do you get the best food in your district? And I say it might be hard because there's gazillions of options.
There's gazillions of great options, but without a doubt, Tierra Mia coffee in my district is my favorite.
Really? Okay, what do you order?
I ordered the rice and beans frap with no whipped cream.
Oh, that sounds great.
It's amazing.
That sounds so good. Best committee assignments?
It's Ways and Means.
Yeah.
Duh.
Do you think appropriators would be like, no, it's us?
You know what's funny? The ENC people call themselves the Harvard of committees, and the people on Ways and Means just laugh. We're like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, you're like, okay, call us.
We're the only the only committee that's mentioned in the Constitution. So we're the longest standing and the best.
Can't be more legit than that. What about the smartest member of Congress?
So I'm going to pick one woman and one man.
I think that's fair.
Don Beyer, I think, is just so intellectually curious. He's working on his PhD in AI or something. I mean, he's amazing. And then I think Madeline Dean is incredibly sharp on the woman's side. So.
Okay, favorite person on the other side of the aisle. And I think I'll have to end it there.
Friendly personality-wise, I'd say Gus Bilrakis, but somebody that I work with on a lot of issues would be Darren LaHood.
Okay, great. I appreciate the Bilrakis. I'm from Florida. He's like right around where I grew up.
He's on my corridor, so I run into him all the time. He's a very nice man.
See,
very nice
bipartisan
man.
relationships are so important.
Yes.
Well, Congresswoman, thank you so much for coming on our inaugural show.
Yes.
It was great talking to you, getting to know you
Great
even
luck
better.
to you.
Thank you. We will be right back.
All right, is this the quick switcheroo?
Thank you.
Of course.
He is what your show is called, The Decider.
It's Washington's hottest new show, and it has the Beltway buzzing.
Americans, they know BS when they see BS.
Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Brody Mullins.
Is this era ending and is a new era beginning?
And veteran strategist Lisa Camuso Miller.
Have you ever had to tell a client no?
Talk to the biggest and most influential players.
We wanted $1 million. He said done.
Rewriting the rules of influence.
Business is going to be on the ballot.
Congress needs to do their job.
They become lapdogs rather than watchdogs.
The people who never talk.
That's such a good question.
Talk to them.
It was kind of fun, actually.
It's Washington's only show by and for insiders.
Welcome to the
Deciders.
Watch weekly right here on 535.
I enlisted as a medic to be there to help my patients, and after an injury, I found myself as a patient. I experienced post-traumatic seizures. Depression is a big one that comes along with it, PTSD. So I pursued my PhD in neuroscience and regenerative medicine. The coalition has helped fund my academic pursuits. They genuinely care about helping the vet in whatever way that they can. Through supporting the coalition, you're supporting some of the veterans that have the biggest needs.
Visit saluteheroes.org to learn more.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rome. I've played many roles on TV and film, but today I want to speak to you as myself about a cause that's very dear to my heart. The Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund provides free help to those who have cancer and those who wish to prevent it. They've also worked tirelessly on banning cancer-causing chemicals in our homes and neighborhoods. I want to thank them as a mom for protecting our families. Please donate today at the Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund at stopcancerfund.com.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Paul Kane of Notice. Joining me now is Senator Angus King, an independent of Maine. We're going to get into several topics, including the Forest Service, the Postal Service, and home energy heating assistance, maybe a few others, depending on how this rolls. But you were just talking about running as an independent off camera. Why have you been able to win as an independent? What is it that you do that voters respond to?
My impression is from talking to people, they like it that I just call them as I see them. And even though I sometimes take positions they don't like, they appreciate that I can explain what I'm doing, and they seem to give me credit for always trying to do what's best for me. And that's it. I've been an independent. I was independent as a governor for 8 years, and then here in the Senate. And some of my colleagues say it's kind of a luxury because I get to do what I think is right.
Now, you and several other Senate Democrats wrote a letter recently about the Forest Service. I know the Forest Service is more of a Western issue, right. But there are some thousands of acres in Maine. And this is a real fear that sort of the ongoing ripple effects of DOGE and cuts are cutting back to research facilities. I think there's something like 57 out of 77 have been targeted for closure. Just yesterday, Kelly Ayotte and Senator Jean Shaheen, she's the Republican governor, announced that they had sort of saved a research site in New Hampshire. How concerned are you about this, and what would it do to, especially fire season out west and in other places?
We're gonna, I'm afraid, have a really bad fire season because there's been such a bad drought in the west all winter, a record low snowpack, and if that dry weather continues, the fire season is going to be horrendous. So that's one issue with the Forest Service. But the other, as you mentioned, is research. And I have sort of a special interest, even though most of the federal forest land is in the West. Maine is the most forested state in the country.
Yes.
And so we have a real interest in the research side and in the capacity of the Forest Service to think about, what's the forest of the future? How do we encourage growth? How do we protect against fires? All of those kinds of things. And cutting these research, and Paul, we're not talking about a lot of money. That's what really bothers me about this. We're saving in the overall scheme of the federal budget, not a lot of money, but we're losing a lot of expertise, a lot of knowledge, and it's going to come back to bite us.
Are there particular sites in Maine that have been targeted or are already closed? Or
no, I don't think we're there yet, but we're sort of everybody's holding their breath, and that's what. I'm concerned about what happens in Maine, but I'm also concerned about those things that affect the forest economy across the country, which has ripple effects in Maine, even though most of our forest is privately owned.
Do you fear at all that there can be a political favoritism where it can be like Republican governor here, their research sites get
Paul,
saved?
how could you suggest such a thing? How preposterous. Yes, of course, that's what's already happened. Mm-hmm. I mean, the cuts in a whole lot of areas have been very much skewed toward protecting red states and punishing blue states. That's been the pattern since the beginning of this administration.
Is there your fear here is expertise, right? You've seen this in other areas where you feel like the budget cuts that are happening, whether it's through
the U.S. Geological Survey, Department of Energy, you name it, the National Science Foundation, NIH, CDC, it's a loss of expertise that you can't replace overnight. It's a loss of people with 10, 20 years of experience and things. I mean, the perfect example is with this business with the cruise ship and the virus.
Uh-huh.
The whole infectious disease center in the CDC and the NIH has been basically decimated. The people who dealt with infectious diseases are gone. So we're letting our defenses down at a very time when these risks are increasing.
Do voters understand that? Your constituents back home, whether they're Republican or Independent or Democratic, are you able to explain to them what the Forest Service means, what the research sites mean, and what they're really providing for your residents back home?
I think they do understand it, particularly if it's in their neighborhood, if it's a center that they know the people or they know the work that they do. But to be honest, Paul, people are so concerned now about housing costs, particularly gasoline and diesel at the pump. I did a calculation just during lunch. The increase in price of gasoline and diesel since the beginning of the Iran war amounts to $33 million an hour for Americans buying gas and diesel. 33 million, it's $802 million a day, approaching $1 billion a day. That's the impact of just the incremental cost since February 27th.
And what do voters say to you? Like, how do you communicate to them that you're trying to ease that affordability problem?
Well, everybody is trying to figure out what to do about it. And of course, the president has now proposed reducing the gas tax. The problem with that is then you starve the money that's necessary to fix the roads. My suggestion is, okay, reduce the gas tax, but apply a windfall profits tax to the gasoline companies, to oil companies that are making that $33 million an hour, and let them fill up the highway trust fund. So we don't lose the highway trust fund, but we have consumers will have lower prices. Now, here's another concern. We could reduce the gas tax, it drops 18 cents, and the oil companies raise the prices 18 cents, and they're better off, but certainly our constituents aren't better off.
Okay, another area where you're looking at government services that are really stretched thin, and this is a unique government service, the Postal Service.
Yeah.
It takes a long time now for mail to get delivered from point A to point B. I approached Senator Rounds, a former governor also, after a recess about a month ago. I was thinking to see how much would the Iran war be a hot button issue for his voters back home. He stopped me and said, whoa, whoa, whoa. And all anyone's talking about back home is the postal service, the mail, especially in rural America.
I'm running into that all the time. I was with some friends over the weekend who quit. They have the means. They quit using the postal service because they can't count on the letter getting through. So they're using, FedEx or something else. And the other piece is the president talking about basically making the postal service into an election agency. Yeah. Checking voter rolls and stuff. That's not their job. Their job is to deliver the mail, for Lord's sake. Let's give them the support they need to provide the basic service they have ever since the founding of the Republic, and not try to turn them into some kind of election regulatory agency, which the president has no authority to do, by the way.
Yeah, you signed on to a letter April 22nd. At one point it says, under the executive order, this is one of Trump's orders where he's trying to force them to be this overseer of elections, essentially. It is the Postal Service who will have the final say about whether to transmit a voter's absentee ballots to election officials, granting USPS the ability to disenfranchise American voters.
Yeah, that's ridiculous on its face.
Okay.
And by the way, the Constitution is really clear about who controls elections. It's the states, and then it says, or Congress. Doesn't mention the president. The president has no power over federal elections. No executive order. An executive order is not a law. And this idea that to convert the Postal Service into an election monitoring agency is just it's ridiculous.
Have you talked to Governor Mills about this, or and any other issues?
I haven't talked to her directly about this, but we've experienced. You asked earlier about the administration, how they cut funds here or there. We've lived through this. When she had her confrontation with President Trump back last year, there was immediately, like the next day, a cutoff of federal funds for our university, for our schools. That was totally in retribution for her having the effrontery to stand up to it.
Mm-hmm. Is there something you all can do to more forcefully, on this issue, on the Postal Service or other issues, that can more forcefully stand up and assert congressional authority, or is it just hard to do?
You use the word we, and the question is, who's we? And so far, my Republican colleagues have essentially refused to acknowledge these problems or do anything about them. And what worries me, Paul, is they're establishing precedents they're not going to like when the shoe is on the other foot, which inevitably happens in our politics. And here's another example. I was just in the Armed Services Committee this morning. 25% of the defense budget is now outside of the appropriations process. $350 billion is going to be appropriated in one of these reconciliation bills, which is entirely partisan. All the time I've been here on armed services, everything we do is bipartisan. And the appropriations process is bipartisan, and we decide which programs are needed and where the funding should be. That's being shortcut, and they're creating what amounts to a slush fund for the Pentagon of 25% of the total budget with little or no congressional oversight. That's an institutional, structural problem I'm trying to get my Republican friends to wake up to, because they're not going to like it if a Democratic president a couple of years from now decides they're going to put a quarter of the budget off, in effect, off limits for bipartisan discussion.
Another federal program that is key to Maine is LIHEAP, Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. For a cold weather state like Maine, it's a big deal. I think 30 to 40,000 families benefit from it. And the entire budget of $1.8 trillion or so dollars, it only costs $4 billion. But it is again on the chopping block. What is it about this program that there are people who always want to go after it?
I don't know. Well, I think one reason is it's easy because it's geographic. The people who benefit from it are in the northern tier. And so, a senator or a representative from Arkansas or Florida doesn't care too much about this program that only affects people in Maine or Minnesota or along the northern part of the country. But I'll tell you, number one, Maine is the most oil-dependent state in the country. We do more home heat with oil than any other state. And so when these heating oil prices hit, it's a real whammy for our citizens, particularly seniors, people on fixed incomes. And so LIHEAP is literally the difference between able to heat your home, put food on the table, or pay for your prescription drugs.
I mean, it is in this affordability talk, it's an issue that's going to drive up prices. And yeah, if you're using heating oil, you're dealing with the boomerang from the strait.
Yeah, you're dealing with literally one of life's necessities.
Yeah. Huh. Well, I first came across the issue 30 years ago when I was down here as a cub reporter writing for a small news service. And one of our papers that we wrote for was the Bangor Daily News.
Oh, sure.
I remember meeting you at a Governors Association dinner, and everybody else was heading out to the Democratic dinner and the Republican dinner.
Probably that was when Mary and I went and had dinner with Jesse Ventura and his wife.
I think that's what you
We were
said.
the Independent Governors Caucus.
Yeah, I think you said something like how my mother taught me, if you want really great company, eat by yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
Is there an issue? But if you think about LIHEAP, though, and you think about the current Senate Majority Leader, he's from South Dakota.
Yeah.
While that might be south of North Dakota, it's a really cold state.
And the chair of the Appropriations Committee is from Maine.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that it will be saved. It's under threat every year, and every year it seems to come in the last minute.
Okay. On affordability, what else could you do that would actually have a real impact within the next 6 months or so that people would feel?
Well, I think the most important thing is to get this war over with. Here's the problem, Paul. It may well get significantly worse before it gets better. We've been running, the world and the United States has been running on reserves, in a sense, and particularly the rest of the world. When those reserves are exhausted, that's a contraction of supply. The price is going to go up even further. And what people don't really think about is, yes, we produce a lot of oil here, but the price of oil is a worldwide commodity.
Mm-hmm.
So even though we produce a lot here, if the price of Brent crude is $120, it's going to show up in our pumps. Now, our oil companies could give us a break if they chose. They could say, yeah, we're producing all this oil here, and we're going to disgorge some of this $33 million an hour money that we're making right now, and give it back to the American people. They could do that. I'm not holding my breath.
Yeah, you're not holding your breath. What? So, how angry are voters right now in terms of, this issue? And how much are they paying attention to what happens in Iran versus how much are they paying attention merely to sort of cost of living
I think people angry, upset, frustrated, all of those things, because you combine, everything's hitting at once. The most obvious is gas.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I borrowed a friend's truck the other day and filled it up with $70. This was a small truck. And so gas is the most obvious. But housing is a hell of a problem. We're short 84,000 housing units in Maine. And because of that shortage, rents are super high. And so housing is a problem. Healthcare is what I'm really worried about, Paul, because remember the One Big Beautiful Bill last year had significant cuts in Medicaid, but they aren't going to hit until this fall after the election. And what I'm worried about is a loss of either services or hospitals. The estimates are we could lose 3 to 5 hospitals in Maine, and particularly in rural areas, because of these cuts that will drastically impact our medical care system. And it's already starting to happen. We've lost birthing centers at a variety of hospitals already in our state, but these serious Medicaid cuts are going to really whack this country come December.
Okay, so far in Maine, though, you've only seen centers within hospitals or medical
cutting services.
Cutting services.
But if a rural hospital goes, The Medicaid recipients, of course, lose their coverage. That we understand that. But if the hospital goes out, everybody else in town loses access. Usually the hospital in these small towns is the major employer, so it's a huge economic development blow. And then people in that region have to travel all that much further to get to medical services. So it's I walked around on the floor during the bill and talking to my Republican colleagues. I said, you guys, you don't realize what this is going to do to rural America. And it's as I recall, it's a $1 trillion cut, and it's going to be devastating.
Do you feel like your Republican colleagues understand that now, and do they want to work to mitigate some of this? Josh Hawley talked about
he was maybe the only one who saw this coming. Remember, he was very concerned about the Medicaid cuts.
Yeah.
I think they're coming to realize it as they hear from their hospitals and from their medical communities. But so far, they've been very reluctant to see what's in front of them. And as I said, they're agreeing and acquiescing in things which are going to become precedents which they're going to regret.
Okay. Is it something that you might be able to fix in a lame duck?
Possibly. I wouldn't. That's about the time then when our friends are going to see these empty hospitals. I have a suggestion, though. I think we ought to name the closed hospitals for the senators who voted for the bill. How's that?
I don't think that would go over too well with them. But, all right. Well, thank you, Senator King. A look ahead to Thursday. It's markup time for the Surface Transportation Authorization Bill. Representative Chris DeLuzio of Pennsylvania will sit down with us and talk about what needs to be in that bill. Congressman Eric Burleson on his Great American Health Care Plan, which he says will give Americans more control over their dollars and a better cost. We'll dig into it with him. And with that, we will be right back to 535.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rome. I've played many roles on TV and film, but today I want to speak to you as myself about a cause that's very dear to my heart. The Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund provides free help to those who have cancer and those who wish to prevent it. They've also worked tirelessly on banning cancer-causing chemicals in our homes and neighborhoods. I want to thank them as a mom for protecting our families. Please donate today at the Cancer Prevention and Treatment Fund at stopcancerfund.com.
National Association of Realtors Advocacy, working to expand access to housing and defend property rights so that more Americans can build generational wealth and prosperity through home ownership, a critical voice in nearly 1/5 of the U.S. economy, supporting 2 jobs for every single-family home sold, and generating more than $760 billion of property tax revenue for state and local governments each year. Realtors are members of the National Association of Realtors.
A simple blood test can detect Alzheimer's years before symptoms appear. Congress can connect Americans to early, accurate dementia diagnosis by supporting the Bipartisan Alzheimer's Screening and Prevention Act, allowing Medicare to cover blood-based Alzheimer's screening. Congress has acted to cover mammograms and other life-saving screenings. Now it can redefine Alzheimer's care, unlocking early detection and access to FDA-approved treatments when they work best. Congress, it's up to you. Paid for by the Alzheimer's Association.
You're watching 535.
This is 535.
535. You're watching 535.
535. 535.
535.
We're live on Capitol Hill, and 535 starts right now.
Welcome back to 535. I'm Paul Kane of Notice, joined here with Mariana Sotomayor, my former colleague, who is now at Puck, and most importantly, the House Appropriations Chairman, Tom Cole of Oklahoma, in your 24th year, 12th term?
Sadly, that's true, yes.
You are now in probably the top 40 or 50 of seniority, right?
Yeah.
Wow. All right. take us away.
It's not like there's much to talk about with you. Happy appropriations season. When is it never not? It almost feels like up here on the House side. I wanted to ask you, because we have seen under this House Republican majority, very opinionated lawmakers. You guys get your jobs done as the appropriators, Cardinals. And then after that is when you have some members say, wait, can you add this? No, take it out. And then you also have what we're seeing right now, right? This debate to fund DHS for 3 years. It's kind of taken away. Does it feel like the power is being taken away from appropriators? And how are you trying to make sure that you all still can hold on to your very important constitutionally directed turf?
Well, number one, it's a very good question. Number two, our problem really is the Senate has decided that defending the filibuster is more important than defending the appropriations process. And we just have a fundamental disagreement in that. Look, the real power of Congress is Article 1 power in the Constitution. It's not in a Senate rule. And so, number one, I blame Democrats in the Senate first. But we have a majority in both chambers that voted to fund the government on all 12 negotiated bills. And Senate Democrats decided that wasn't good enough, and they would use the filibuster in a way that's never been used. And frankly, Republican senators let them do it. I mean, we urge them to do what you've done with the appointment power. When one side abused the filibuster too much, you took it away. First, the Democrats took it away for everything below the Supreme Court and judicially. And you ought to do that. And then the Republicans did it, obviously, with the Supreme Court. We should do the same thing with the appropriations process. These are not vast philosophical differences. This is just the day-to-day operation of the government. But if we don't get our work done, we have situations like we have had in the past where literally parts of the government don't function at times when it's important that they function. The Department of Homeland Security certainly ought to be functioning no matter how you feel about the Iranian military episode. The reality is this is the largest sponsor of state terrorism. You would want your Homeland Security Department operating. Democrats decided not to allow that to happen. Republicans in the Senate allowed us to do it, so we have to do things a little bit differently on that. But no, to your point, I agree. I think appropriations is how, on a day-to-day basis, Congress collectively, on both sides of the aisle, both checks the executive branch or expedites the things that it wants to do. Anytime that it falls into a difficult situation, I do not like giving any administration 3 years worth of funding for particular agencies within an overall jurisdiction. But I don't think we have much choice in this case. But over time, Congress, in my view, is eroding its own day-to-day power. That's a mistake.
Do you worry, according to Pew and their studies, in almost 5 decades, we've only had there used to be, I think, 13, maybe 14 at one point. Now it's 12 appropriations bills, all signed into law on time, just, I think, 4 times. I believe the most recent was like 1997. Even if it's a little bit late, the work isn't getting done. And why has it just kept getting worse each time? Your leadership team celebrated in the end of January for getting 11 of the 12 done.
Actually, we got 12 out of 12. That's what we celebrated across the House.
Yeah.
And we thought we had a deal with the Senate, and they changed the rules of the game.
Okay. What happened over that time? Is there something about the committee where it lost some of its luster, its stature?
Look, I think that's a very good question with a long and complex answer. Number one,
we're here for it.
We've got too many members that have decided that this is an individual sport rather than a team sport. So you have to have teams that will work together, and that means you don't get everything you want, but you have to be willing to continue to move the product. So that's been a failure up here, and I think the polarization in Congress is enormously greater than it was when I first got here. When I first arrived here, there really were lots of blue dog Democrats who were susceptible to voting for more conservative bills than the majority of their conference. There were also lots of moderate Republicans in the Northeast in particular that might be a little bit to the left of where the mainstream was, but they were kind of a lubricant. But if you look at it over the last 20, 30 years, and it really begins in the 1980s, but it's accelerated in 2000. You know, the number of people that could vote both ways has gotten fewer and fewer. And so we've lost the lubricant in between. We've lost conservative Democrats, they've lost moderate Republicans. And that's a complicated thing. Finally, I do think, you know, the polarization around the presidency on both sides, that we're going to be with our president regardless what, even to the detriment of interests in your own district, have become, you know, that's become a reality. And it, again, enormously complicates the legislative and particularly the appropriations process.
So another thing, I wrote about this in Notice on Friday, and it's sort of the eroding norms around this place. I walked out the last Thursday getaway day with Ryan Zinke, and he just sort of rolled his eyes and said, there are no rules here anymore. And I said, what do you mean? And what he talked about weren't the rules per se, capital R. It was, he got here and he learned you always vote for your person for speaker. You never vote against your party's rule. If you're going to vote against a bill, you go to the chair and tell him or her to their face, and never sign a discharge petition. Well, all of those things now are starting to sort of decay. You've got a conservative rebellion on discharge petition with the Epstein files. You had it with moderates on the Haitian TPS bill. There was a day in mid-April where a discharge petition passed and a rule failed on the same day. What is going on with that, and how is there no punishment, no sanction?
Well,
no
the ability
to
punish has diminished, partly because members can get individual financing for their campaigns, partly because some of them come here to make a point instead of make a difference. There's an enormous gap between those two things. You know, I often tell members, no offense, but the more you're on television, usually the less effective you are, because you're making a point all the time. But again, the exploitation of rules that were meant to expedite things to get unrelated things is a real challenge to us. You know, to pass the last batch of appropriations bill, which funded 70% of the government. I mean, literally, we lost, if we had not had Donald Trump, we couldn't have gotten a rule. But we couldn't get the bill if we didn't have Democrats at the same time, because we had 21 Republicans who decided they would vote against appropriation bills that the president supported, and that also the Democrats, enough of them, could vote for. So, again, a lot of this is just not knowing how the game is played if you want to get something done. But it can be played enormously well if you just want to make a point, you know, and we have too many members that want to make a point as opposed to compensate.
I mean, you mentioned the polarization, that members want to make a point. Sometimes that becomes a whole group, and that has at times led to government shutdowns. That's where I'm sure you guys finish your work, you pass as many bills as you can, and then the ticker runs out. Again, we're entering 2027 appropriations process. What is September 30th going to look like?
Well,
it might be a little
the
hard
reality
to
is,
predict.
come September 30th, and this predates the current era, but it's not unusual to get to September 30th. We will have all the bills out of the Appropriations Committee. Our leadership will have gotten several across the floor, maybe even the majority of federal spending. But the Senate will not move as quickly. And the reality is we'll end up passing a CR sometime in mid-November. Then we'll come back after the election, and the winners will basically decide, do we want to finish our work between now and the end of the calendar year, which is always the right answer, should be yes, or do we think we'll get some advantage by dragging it forward when our majority shows up? In this case, look, the president's still going to be the president on the other side of the midterms. I would tell my Democratic friends, if they're successful, that they should want to get the work done. I would tell our Republican friends the same thing. If we're successful, you should want to finish up this year's work now. There's nothing that's going to get better next year. You're just going to slow down the process. So let's wrap it up. On the Appropriations Committee, we can still do that. We just demonstrated we could do that. Again, all of these got out of the House. It's a Senate problem, and we have the majority in the Senate. We have a bipartisan majority in the Senate that was ready to fund the bill. and this is the bone I would pick with my friends in the Senate, you're allowing the filibuster, and when you talk to them, they act like that's the great defender of democracy is the filibuster. The Constitution is the great defender of democracy and the Bill of Rights. And the power of Congress is best exercised through the appropriations and oversight function on our committee. And you should just operate you shouldn't empower the minority in that process. Again, we could pass every single bill that we passed out of the House across the Senate if the Senate would just rely on the majority instead of the filibuster.
Are you worried, though, that you could have a situation where if your side loses the majority in one or the other chamber, where your folks are going to be like, let's just ram everything through right now that we possibly can?
Well, I think the temptation's always great for the side that loses the election to do that. And I don't begrudge them that. You use power while you have power. So there's nothing wrong with us doing that. Now, in this case, it would simply be the appropriations bills, the funding of the government. But if you look out longer, if you're the Trump administration, do you want to deal with your debt ceiling, which is probably coming up sometime next year, now? Or do you want to wait till there's a Democratic House or maybe a Democratic Senate as well? I would argue you want to get it done now.
Are those
that's the
conversations
appropriate
happening
use of power.
on the debt ceiling? Are those conversations happening right now?
I couldn't. Am I deeply in conversation? No. I just know when the alarm clocks go off around here, and that alarm clock's going to go off. And if we don't have control of the House and the Senate, then I would suspect the White House will want to try and do something and move ahead quickly there. But I think that's true of a variety of functions. And again, administrations that are leaving do exactly the same thing. And there were, in my view, lots of abuses as the Biden administration was leaving in terms of spending money, shoving it out the door. I mean, when Stacey Abrams is getting $2 billion for an NGO that raised $100 a year before, believe me, you have every reason to slow down spending and take a long look at this if you're an incoming Republican administration. So, each party on the verge of losing power or even strength in the legislature will try to move aggressively. Administrations that are in their final days do the same thing. And again, they do that on both sides of the aisle. That's not a partisan accusation. It's just recognizing the reality of politics.
You are just back from spending a week at home. Something that we want to talk about on this show is what are we missing up here? What are your constituents talking about that may not be necessarily the front headlines, the discussions that are front of mind for all of us up here on Capitol Hill?
You know, they really are talking largely about the same things you are. They're worried about affordability. They're worried about gas prices. They're worried, very much about what's the position of the United States in the world. They see an international environment that is deteriorating. I think we're moving from a post-World War II sort of ordered universe into great power competition that's been going on for some time. So there's a lot of things they're worried about, but I wouldn't say there's anything uniquely Oklahoman other than they wonder, will OU once again make the college football playoffs? And can we return the national trophy for the OU women's softball team to where it belongs, so we win the national title again? And finally, can the Thunder repeat? Those are the three big questions.
Okay.
All right, SJ. We hope to have you back in September. We want to go inside the cigar skiff. Explain it. Explain the cigar
It's not
skiff.
forbidden territory. You're welcome anytime.
I was in there a month or so ago. Daryl Isla brought me inside. For the viewers out there, the House Appropriations chair gets literally a corner office, the corner of the
We used to have the whole wall.
Very convenient to the floor, so you guys go in and out
we spend
for
more
votes.
time on the floor than anybody else. And we used to have that entire wall. We had it since 1865.
Yeah.
So he overturned a lot of traditions when he took two offices away from us. And if it hadn't been for Hal Rogers, we'd have probably lost the corner office as well.
Yeah. All right, so this is our segment of 1 minute, House 1 minutes. We call them 535 1 minutes.
Not magic minutes.
So quick responses. What's the best part of being in Congress?
The people you meet. Look, America produces enormously talented public servants and honestly very interesting people. So The best part is who you meet, who you get to talk to.
What's the most difficult part?
Yeah, the worst part.
Getting legislation across the floor in a highly polarized and highly partisan Congress.
You could fix one thing, just one. What would it be?
I would make sure the people that need to do their work before we appropriate got their work done. We have a hard time getting presidential budgets on time. They're due by February the 15th. New presidents can't do that, but after that year, you should be able to do it. And second, nobody's gotten a House budget resolution of either party across the floor in 5 Congresses. So we never start out knowing what our top line is. We have to figure that out along the way.
Best food in your district.
What?
The best food in your district. Where can we find it?
Actually, the best food in my district's right outside my district. There's a place called Cousins Barbecue, which is fantastic. The best barbecue place in the country. It's in
Whose
Oklahoma
district?
City and Stephanie Bice.
Okay, got it.
All right. What's the best committee assignment?
Appropriations.
Better than rules?
Are you kidding? Is this like an intelligence test? No, I mean, appropriations is a place I always wanted to be when I got here, a place I really enjoyed. I think it's a place where a lot of the traditions of the old Congress survive. There's a lot of bipartisanship. I have enormous respect for my counterpart, Rosa DeLauro. We've worked together for many, many years. And look, we don't have members on the committee I'm embarrassed by. Most of them are, I would call it, however liberal or however conservative, they're let's make a deal politicians. Let's find something that works and make sure the government's funded.
On that note, who's your favorite Democrat to smoke a cigar with?
That is tough because so few of them smoke anymore, and they hide it if they do. Jimmy Panetta is a great guy to sit down and smoke a cigar with. I mean, he's got the DNA, in the family, so to speak. That's a family that I admire the public service that both of them have rendered to the country.
All right, I think that's going to be a wrap. Listen, everybody, thank you very much for watching 535. Come back tomorrow. We'll be here with a whole bunch of lawmakers. It's going to be a great fun.
Thanks for tuning in.